Chapter 821. Less than an hour later, King Baishan told Wu Qi in detail how he had colluded with the crown prince of the celestial court and Liu Bang. He even told Wu Qi what Liu Bang had asked him to do, including the location of the armed forces he had prepared for this matter, and who in Liangzhu would obey his orders. Wu Qi carefully interrogated King Baishan, and in just an hour, he had found out the locations of more than 300 secret strongholds. On the surface, these strongholds had nothing to do with King Baishan. Many of them were just the most common civilian manors in Yuxiong Plain, and even the people living in those manors themselves had no idea how many priceless treasures were buried under their feet. King Baishan's entire clan was executed. Gao rushed excitedly to the stone couch where Wu Qi was lying, grabbed Wu Qi's hand, and cried out, "Are you all right, King of East Sea Prefecture?" Wu Qi's neck was broken, and his head was bent at a very strange angle as he squinted at Gao. The bizarre scene startled Gao, and even Princess Xianglu, who was waiting to watch the show, cried out in alarm. She hurried to Wu Qi's side with a gust of wind and carefully put his broken neck back together. A large sheet of green light burst out of Princess Xiangli's palm, and a rich life force kept rushing into Wu Qi's neck. Gradually, Wu Qi's eyes regained a glimmer of light. "Your Highness," he gasped, "all my bodyguards and servants are dead, and I only have a few people left. Your Highness, you have to uphold justice for me. You have to go to His Majesty and ask him why King Baishan could openly besiege me with tens of thousands of soldiers." After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi nodded with a smile and said, "One last question. If you answer it, I'll let you die a quick death." What is Liu Bang's plan when he comes to you? Tell me your plan, and I'll give you a quick death." After thinking for a while, Wu Qi nodded slowly and said, "First it was the sovereign, then it was Prapudaratna Buddha. Even the few primordial immortals I killed have become an excuse for them to threaten Goddess Nuwa. In this way, the more Du forces those itinerant immortals, the better an excuse they have. No wonder they have been developing itinerant cultivators on Pangu continent all these years. They want to be cannon fodder for Du, and then use it as an excuse to go to Empress Wa's palace to ask for an explanation. On a stone couch in the center of the main hall, Chi was leaning against an animal skin cushion. Hovering in front of him was a clump of black purgatory fiend flame, in which King Baishan's soul was twisting and struggling, howling at the top of his lungs. In front of him floated a clump of black inferno hell fiend flame, in which King Baishan's soul was writhing and struggling, howling at the top of his lungs. It was such a miserable scene, and together with the sharp aura emanating from the 9 Deaths spirit recovery pill that lingered in the hall, anyone with a discerning eye could tell with just one glance what kind of fierce attack Wu Qi and his personal guards had suffered. Coupled with the hundreds of miles of black desert outside the hall, everyone knew what had happened here. King Baishan heaved a long sigh and told Wu Qi everything about Liu Bang's plan with a ghostly howl. Every now and then, Huang Liang would tear a piece of paper from the thick book in his hand, and the general of East Sea Province standing next to him would grab the paper and rush out with dozens of elite soldiers. The papers recorded detailed information about King Baishan's secret strongholds, all of which had warehouses of various sizes, containing a large number of King Baishan's personal treasures. No wonder they could block the gate of Empress Wa's palace, for they had occupied the absolute height of morality. He put away Kunwu's swords and twisted his body. Cracking noises kept ringing out from inside his body, as all his bones broke into dozens of places at his will. It was an extremely shameless technique found in Scroll of Stealing, a technique that was specially used to feign death and escape from being hunted down. It was called the Spirit Serpent Tail Breaking Technique. By using this technique to break one's bones, one only needed to circulate the energy within 1 day and 1 night to reconnect the bones, and it would not cause any harm to the user's body. King of Han, Liu Bang, is just a newly recruited aide of the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court. I, King Baishan, and the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court have been working together for many years. In a corner of the Great Hall, a small alchemy cauldron was being propped up, in which Princess Xianglu was yawning as she concocted a cauldron of domineering, 9 Deaths spirit rejuvenating pills. It was a military prescription handed down by the Directorate of Celestials, specially used to rescue the badly wounded and dying soldiers of Deyu on the battlefield. Wu Qi breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He struggled to grab King Yangshan's sleeve, put on a loyal face, and cried out, "Lord Lao Wang, I have something confidential to report to His Majesty, Your Highness, please." Of the two palaces Emperor Haozuan gave Wu Qi, only the main palace remained intact, while the other palaces had long been destroyed by the 10 Deaths formation and turned into black sand. In addition to the main palace, Wu Qi's 2 palaces and dozens of manors, as well as the gardens hundreds of miles around, had all turned into a decaying desert. Not even a blade of grass grew on the black, decaying soil, and only a few crows, who had come from nowhere in the past 2 days, were cawing on a few surviving rocks. Wu Qi whispered a few words into King Yangshan's ear, and the latter's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Recalling the extreme measures Deyu had taken against the immortals and itinerant cultivators of Panga continent over the years, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. There had been too many people who could use him against them. Coupled with the fact that important members of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had been killed during this period of time, the other side had enough bargaining chips. So many that if they were willing to put down their pride, even if Goddess Nuwa wanted to protect the human race, she could do nothing in front of those people. Time went by, and after another 2 hours, Wu Qi finally squeezed out the last copper coin from King Baishan. Satisfied, he knocked on the inferno flame that had trapped King Baishan's soul, then asked King Baishan with a smile, "Do you want to die a quick death?" Princess Zhonglu rushed over like a gust of wind, and the dozens of military officers of East Sea standing in the hall obediently stretched out their arms and legs. Princess Zhonglu swung her fists and punched their arms and legs. The sound of bones breaking rang out incessantly, and before long, each of these military officers had an average of 70 to 80 bones broken. One by one, Chi fell to the ground, moaning and groaning. King Yangshan strode forward and said in a deep voice, "Tan Lang, His Majesty has learned of the situation here. King Baishan was set free by someone, and His Majesty has issued an edict to execute his entire clan, old and young, men and women. Don't worry, this will never happen again." Carefully burning King Baishan's soul with the fiend flame, fearing that he would be finished in an instant, Wu Qi carefully interrogated King Baishan for all the information he was interested in. Standing beside the stone couch, Huang Liang's eyes gleamed with a golden light as he wrote down all the information King Baishan had told him. Gao opened his mouth, but he could not speak. After listening to King Baishan's confession, Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then crushed the inferno flame and crushed King Baishan's soul. Interesting. Lu Bang's scheme is really not to be underestimated. Does the Celestial Court want to control Panga continent? But, is that enough? Before long, the sound of rumbling footsteps rang out as King Yangshan, Gao, and a large number of Deyu's courtiers strode into the Great Hall, escorted by numerous soldiers. As soon as Gao entered the Great Hall, he was startled by the military officers of East Sea, who were groaning in pain on the ground. Their bodies were riddled with broken bones, and some of them had clearly suffered a severe blow to their chests. From time to time, bloody red bubbles gushed out of their mouths, and their eyes were rolled back. It was clear that they were on the verge of death. Just like the name of this pill, it was a tyrannical pill that had a 90% chance of death upon consumption. Those who were seriously injured still had some hope of coming back to life, but ordinary people who took it would die from the excruciating pain in their internal organs. When the Directorate of Celestials created the prescription, a large number of people died on the spot because of the pain. Among 100 people, less than 10% could survive. The most precious treasures of King Baishan's bloodline were all in these secret strongholds. If Wu Qi could get his hands on all of them, it would not be a problem for him to pay the astronomical amount of natural treasures needed to lift the restrictive spells. After pondering for a long time, Wu Qi's eyelid twitched suddenly. Through his divine sense, he found that the man he was waiting for was not far away. He pulled out a Kunwu sword and slashed it hard at Huang Liang's thigh. With a crack, the bones in Huang Liang's leg broke. He howled and rolled on the ground, clutching his thigh and moaning. Since the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture was famous for its purgatory, it was easy to imagine how vicious and sinister this cultivation technique was. Wu Qi used the Inferno Hell Fiend flame to refine King Baishan's soul, and in just an hour, King Baishan had obediently told him everything Wu Qi had interrogated him. At this time, King Baishan did not even hope to be reincarnated. All he wanted was for Wu Qi to destroy his soul. That would be the greatest happiness for him. Some of these treasures were rare natural treasures, some life-prolonging medicines, some extremely powerful talisman armors secretly crafted by the Directorate of Celestials, and some were all kinds of treasures that were prohibited in Great Yu but highly sought after by the immortals. Some of these secret strongholds were left behind by King Baishan's ancestors, and the precious treasures in them were piled up like mountains. They were not something a nouveau riche like Wu Qi could compare with. King Baishan's soul stared blankly at Wu Qi and said, "Just let me die. What else do you want?" Fortunately, Wu Qi now had many experts under his command, and he had enough men to use. He had sent hundreds of men to dig out all the treasures in King Baishan's strongholds in the shortest time possible. As for the treasure vault in King Baishan's mansion in Liangzhu, it was already Emperor Haozuan's private property, and Wu Qi had no interest in going there to stir up trouble. With difficulty, Wu Qi turned his head to look at Gao. With a crack, Wu Qi's neck bone broke in two. Feebly, he squeezed out a few words, "Your Highness. You are here. Isn't King Baishan imprisoned in the imperial prison? Why did he appear in the palace last night?" The soldiers of Deyu had strong fleshly bodies, but once they were seriously injured, they could not absorb Panga's sacred energy to heal themselves, and their strong fleshly bodies would bring great trouble to the doctors. At least, ordinary medicine could not penetrate their strong fleshly bodies. The 9 Deaths Spirit Recovery Pill was a peerlessly tyrannical first aid pill. If a soldier was seriously injured and on the verge of death, there was a chance that he could save them by giving them a pill. But, should he inform Emperor Haozuan of the specific information? The entire hall was filled with the sharp medicinal smell of the 9 Deaths rejuvenating spirit pill, which was as sharp as a knife's edge. Just by smelling it, the few generals of East Sea Province standing at the entrance of the hall felt as if someone had punched their noses, and tears and snot were about to flow out of their eyes. They looked in horror at Princess Xianglu, who was squatting and yawning in a corner of the hall, wondering how terrible the pill she had concocted was. Chapter 822. King Baishan had rebelled and colluded with immortals to plot against Deyu. When the news that Wu Qi had told King Yangshan was sent back to Liangzhu, Deyu was shocked, and the city was plunged into chaos. As the most important witness and the most direct victim, Wu Qi, who had dozens of broken bones in his body and had just reconnected them with a 9 Death Spirit rejuvenating pill, was ordered by Emperor Haozuan to follow the imperial guards of Deyu, who had come to pick him up, to the city. While dozens of giant flying ships were flying in the sky, the city was ringing with a loud bell. It was the alarm bell that Deyu would only ring when he was in great danger. King Yangshan stood on the bow of the leading ship, while Wu Qi, who had just recovered from his injury but was badly injured, stood trembling beside him, while Princess Xianglu carefully supported Wu Qi. Princess Xianglu, who had been tough and strong, now put on a look of a wronged wife, her eyelids drooping and tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. She looked as if she would not live alone if Wu Qi died. Coupled with Wu Qi's pale face and the wisp of gray smoke between his eyebrows, the two of them looked miserable and cold, which suited Wu Qi's current situation. His palace was invaded, and everyone was killed from top to bottom. Of the tens of thousands of guards and personal guards around him, only a few dozen generals with the highest cultivation bases were left. Anyone who had encountered such a thing should be in the same situation as Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, right? From time to time, King Yangshan turned to look at Wu Qi, quickly calculating Wu Qi's current situation in his mind. He had not expected Wu Qi to be seriously injured. King Baishan was the king of Deyu's imperial council, who was as famous as him, and had great military power. It was only natural that Wu Qi would be seriously injured when he summoned 2 or 3 supreme oracles to plot against Wu Qi. But the strength around Wu Qi was a little beyond King Yangshan's expectation. It had only been a little over a year since Wu Qi was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture, but he had already gathered dozens of generals who were at the peak of the realm of Second Panga Heaven. Presumably, he had used the time acceleration ability of the Supreme Tower to cultivate such a group of capable subordinates. A man who cultivated both fleshly body and magic, who had stepped into the realm of Supreme, and who was conferred the title of King of East Sea Prefecture, should not only focus on winning him over, but should also try his best to win him over to his side. It was true that his son, Gao, was a good friend of Wu Qi, but how could he make Wu Qi truly one of his men? After giving a quick glance at Princess Xianglu, who was beautiful and naturally exuded a noble bearing, King Yangshan began to think about how many unmarried daughters he had in his house, and they had to be the kind of daughters whose mothers were of high status. Otherwise, he would be too embarrassed to give a maidservant daughter to Wu Qi. Facing the strong wind that blew against his face, Wu Qi coughed softly and said, "Lord Lao Wang, have you told His Majesty what I've told you?" King Yangshan, who was lost in thought, was taken aback. He looked at Wu Qi, nodded, and said, "His Majesty is furious, and the whole court is shocked." No one expected that, as a member of Great Yu's imperial clan, King Baishan's fourth-generation great-ancestor was my brother in terms of seniority. I never thought he would do such a treacherous thing. After pondering for a moment, King Yangshan sighed and said, "Escaping from the imperial prison without permission and leading an army to attack an important minister of Diyu, these two crimes are enough to get his whole clan beheaded." But the other things King Yangshan mentioned. It's not that I don't believe them, and it's not that His Majesty doesn't trust you, but it's just too sensational. That's why I want King Yangshan to go to His Majesty and explain it to him in person. Wu Qi nodded slowly and said nothing. King Yangshan narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "It's a matter of great importance, and even I can't believe it. I can't believe that Yuxiong army, who guards Diyu, has actually betrayed him. That Yuxiong army was the core army of Diyu's imperial army, specifically chosen from the members of Diyu's imperial clan and aristocratic clans. More than 60% of them had the bloodline of the imperial clan, and they were the most elite, loyal, and reliable strategic force of Diyu. Yuxiong army was extremely large, and all its supplies and equipment were of the best quality in Diyu. It was divided into 5 armies, the left, the right, the front, and the middle, and they were responsible for guarding Liangzhu and the imperial palace of Diyu. They were the human emperor's personal army. The predecessor of this army was the invincible army of the human race, which the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan had used to conquer all the fiends on Panga continent. Whether in terms of tradition or actual combat prowess, Yuxiong army was the #1 army of Diyu, and no other army under the heaven could beat it. In terms of combat prowess alone, all the reserve soldiers of Yuxiong army were elites who had reached the peak of the first Panga heaven, and only those who had broken through the realm of second Panga heaven could be considered as official soldiers of Yuxiong army. Even the lowest-ranking soldier in Yuxiong army was a lieutenant, and he was divided into 3 grades, lieutenant, colonel, and general, which corresponded to the realm of the 9 stars realms of the second Panga heaven. But when Wu Qi told King Yangshan that he had found out from King Baishan's soul that something had happened to most of the soldiers in Yuxiong army, it not only frightened King Yangshan out of his wits, but also nearly made Emperor Haozuan fall off his throne. Putting aside the strategic force of Diyu like the secret palace, Yuxiong army was the strongest army of Diyu, and it belonged to the category of an important weapon of the state. If something were to happen to Yuxiong army, the whole state of Diyu would be shaken. The soldiers selected to join Yuxiong army were all the descendants of Diyu's imperial clan and Diyu's noble clans. If something were to happen to them, wouldn't it mean that the clans behind them were disloyal as well? Therefore, even though he knew that Wu Qi was seriously injured, at Emperor Haozuan's order, King Yangshan had no choice but to escort Wu Qi to Liangzhu on 30 giant flying ships with 3,000 soldiers of the right Yuxiong army, together with a private guard from his mansion. After killing the sovereign, Gao, King Yufeng, was rewarded by Emperor Haozuan and given the command of the right Yuxiong army in Liangzhu. Therefore, when he escorted Wu Qi to Liangzhu this time, he had specially transferred 3,000 reliable soldiers from the right Yuxiong army to Liangzhu. The palace where Wu Qi was attacked was less than 100,000 miles away from Liangzhu. With the speed of the flying ships, it would only take them an hour to reach the short distance, which was equivalent to the outskirts of Liangzhu. With 3,000 elite soldiers of the Yuxiong army and some of the elites from King Yangshan's mansion accompanying them, there was no way anything could go wrong. If anyone dared to attack the convoy outside the city, they would be courting death. It was quiet on the bow of the ship. King Yangshan was in a complicated mood. On one hand, he was thinking about how to win over Wu Qi completely, and on the other hand, what he should do if something really happened to Yuxiong army. Based on what King Yangshan knew about the ultimate power of Diyu, if something really happened to Yuxiong army, all it would take would be a thorough purge, killing all the soldiers of Yuxiong army. The scariest thing was that the soldiers of Yuxiong army were involved in more than just themselves. With a wry smile, King Yangshan shook his head gently and sighed. Looking at King Yangshan, Wu Qi also shook his head gently and sighed. Then, he turned to the two generals of Yuxiong army, who had come up behind him quietly, and asked in a deep voice, "Generals, why are you here without being summoned?" King Yangshan was lost in his thoughts just now, so he did not notice what was going on around him. Gao was frowning and thinking about something, so he did not hear what was going on behind him either. But, Wu Qi had already locked down the space tens of thousands of miles around him with his divine sense, so the movements of these two generals of Yuxiong army, whose cultivation bases had reached the peak of the 9 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, could not be hidden from him. Upon hearing Wu Qi's voice, Gao hurriedly turned to look over his shoulder. Arching his brows, he cried out in a deep voice, "Dongyi Huang, Dongyi Mo, what's the matter?" Clad in heavy armors, Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo put their right hands on the hilts of the sabers hanging from their waists and cried out in a low voice, "King of East Sea Prefecture, you can't enter Liangzhu." Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu looked as usual, just looking at them with a faint smile on their faces. King Yangshan and Gao's faces flickered. "How dare you? Do you know what you're talking about? What do you want? You." Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo were the left and right military ministers of Yuxiong army, and Gao's assistants. One was in charge of the daily training of the soldiers, and the other was in charge of the logistics and distribution of supplies. They were veterans of Yuxiong army, and also Gao's right-hand men in controlling it. But judging from their words and deeds today, it was clear that Wu Qi was right. Something was really wrong with Yuxiong army. It was Emperor Haozuan's imperial edict that Wu Qi was allowed to enter Liangzhu. What Dongyi Huang and Dongyi Mo had said just now was a clear sign of disobeying the imperial edict. In Diyu, which valued tradition and laws the most, this was definitely a felony punishable by death. Dongyi Huang let out a long roar, drew his saber, and thrust it at Wu Qi's heart. Wu Qi took a step back unhurriedly, but King Yangshan was already in front of Wu Qi. His right palm struck out like a bolt of lightning and slapped Dongyi Huang's chest before the saber could reach him. King Yangshan was a supreme expert whose physical strength had broken through the level of Hongmeng Panga heaven, and before his iron palm, Dongyi Huang's body was as fragile as tofu. A crisp sound rang out as Dongyi Huang's upper body exploded, and a soul, dripping with blood, was caught in King Yangshan's hand. But, taking advantage of the brief moment when Dongyi Huang drew his saber, Dongyi Mo pulled out a black skull about the size of a fist. He bit off his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood onto the skull. Immediately, a shrill cry of a child rose into the sky. Upon hearing the cry, King Yangshan and Gao shrieked as dirty blood sprayed out of their 7 orifices at the same time. Fortunately, both of them had extraordinary treasures specially crafted for their souls by the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials. As soon as their souls were shaken, the treasures were activated to protect them. 2 balls of red fire enveloped King Yangshan and Gao. Coughing up mouthfuls of blood, they stared fixedly at the black skull in Dongyi Mo's hand as if they were looking at a ghost. Clearly, they recognized the skull and knew who it represented. Seeing that King Yangshan and Gao were seriously injured by the cry, Wu Qi immediately exercised his cultivation base and forced a large amount of cheap blood out of his 7 orifices. The blood was transformed from chaotic energy, so Wu Qi did not feel any pain at all when he coughed out 30 to 50 kilograms of blood. A great amount of blood gushed out from the wound, and very soon, Wu Qi's entire body was dyed red. Drops of blood flowed down his body and onto the deck, making him look extremely miserable. Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi tilted his body and leaned into Princess Zhongli's arms. Princess Zhongli gave a cold snort. A five-colored divine ray rolled out from behind her, and the avatar of the god of thunder, wrapped in a faint glow of lightning, spun out of it. A red thunderbolt as thick as a water tank appeared out of thin air, smashing heavily onto Dong Yimo's body with a terrifyingly high temperature. Dong Yimo howled miserably as he was turned into a wisp of smoke by Princess Zhongli's thunderbolt. But, the black skull spun up into the air and let out a shrill cry, transforming into numerous black ripples that rushed toward Princess Zhongli. Chapter 823. With a sigh, Bai Huang Zongling laughed mockingly and said, "I can't believe a man of humble birth like you could obtain the legacy of the sacred emperor, and you killed the 7 primordial experts of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. You don't even have the chance to enter the transmigration." Waving his hand casually, Wu Qi leaped forward like a bolt of lightning. Wherever his sword passed, 3 pitch-black skeletons would have their spines broken, falling to the ground in a sorry state. Kunwu's swords were extremely sharp, and they were personally forged by the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan. How could these evil creatures withstand a single blow from them? King Yangshan and Gao burst out laughing at the same time. With Kunwu's swords in their hands, they felt a great sense of heroism rising in their hearts, and their fear of Bai Huang Zongling lessened. Bai Huang Zongling's voice rang out leisurely, "Of course I can't decide what will happen to the 3 kings after their deaths, but of the 18 Buddhas who guard the netherworld and control the 6 paths of reincarnation, 3 of them are now waiting for the souls of the 3 kings in outer heavenly realms. King Yangshan will be a pig or a dog for all eternity, and King Yufeng will be a chicken or a duck for all eternity. You will have to be reincarnated for all eternity before you can be human again." As for the kings of East Sea Prefecture, Wu Qi's eyes went wide. Gray ghost energy shot out of them, and a spirit light that was hundreds of feet long shone out like a searchlight. Looking into the distance with the eyes of 1,000 ghosts, he saw that with the flying ship as the center, 12 pitch-black supreme towers had formed an encirclement with a diameter of 3,000 miles. Black screens of light were wriggling and leaping between the supreme towers, completely sealing off the connection between this part of the void and the outside world. Wave after wave of arrows hit King Yangshan's body, but all of them exploded into pieces on his tough flesh. King Yangshan did not move at all. "How dare a bunch of rebellious children like you say you want to take my life? Hee, pigs and dogs for all eternity. When this king annihilates your entire clan, I will definitely pour the souls of your entire clan into the bodies of pigs and dogs as sacrifices." However, it was clear that the cultivation base of the person who made this black skeleton was much stronger than Princess Zhongli. A series of loud booms rang out as the black ripples collided with the talismans. The surrounding air was pushed away by the shockwaves, and several dozens of flying ships nearby were blown away by the shockwaves. A few of them could not withstand the shockwaves and shattered on the spot. Amidst the loud noise, the spirit talismans drawn by Princess Zhongli continued to shatter. Every time a spirit talisman shattered, Princess Zhongli would hold on to Wu Qi and take a big step back. The color of her pretty face had also turned a shade paler. With just a long cry, dozens of second Pangu heaven generals, Chi-Chi, were killed. Bai Huang Zongling's voice rang out of the black skeleton again, "You are just a bunch of good-for-nothings. Your Highnesses, it's almost time for you to go." King Yangshan spun abruptly and narrowly avoided being hit in his vital organs. The arrow whistled through the air and pierced his right shoulder, bringing out a large amount of blood. "Otherwise, everything will be useless. His Majesty won't be able to send anyone to save you in time," Bai Huang Zongling said unhurriedly. King Yangshan and Gao's faces turned extremely unsightly. It was at this critical moment that the 3,000 elites of the right army of Yu Xiong drew their bows and released arrows at the same time. In the blink of an eye, 100 waves of arrows, each 3,000 strong enough to pierce through the stars, shot toward Wu Qi and the others. Bai Huang Zongling gave a strange laugh and said, "Besides, even if His Majesty sends someone to save you, who else can he send? How do you know that the person who will save you is not here to kill you? More than 1,000 drops of black liquid dripped out of the little skull, giving birth to more than 1,000 skeletons that emanated a threatening evil aura. At the same time, they raised up their arms and slowly approached Wu Qi and his company. Their fleshly bodies, which were rapidly losing their vitality, fell from the sky like raindrops. In the end, only the dozens of second Pangu heaven generals brought by King Yangshan managed to survive the rain of arrows, roaring furiously as they rushed to the flying ship. But, as soon as they set foot on the deck, the little black skeleton let out a shrill, unpleasant cry of a child. The bodies of the dozens of loyal guards trembled, and as they had no time to produce talismans to protect their souls, a great deal of dirty blood gushed out of their 7 orifices, while their brains gushed out together with the blood. As soon as the black ripples formed by the childlike cry came in front of Princess Xianglu, she disdainfully pointed at the air in front of her 19 times in a row. Wisps of spirit light shot out of her fingertips, forming 19 talismans that were each about a foot long in the air. Low and deep sounds of nature gushed out from these 19 talismans. There was the loud rumbling of the stars rotating, the majestic rumbling of the ocean tides, and the vigorous and loud sound of the strong wind blowing across the vast expanse of pine trees. King Yangshan laughed and said, "Cut the crap, Bai Huang Zongling. You can't kill us now, but you won't have the chance later. I'm afraid the rescue team His Majesty has sent is not far from here, right?" A deep, powerful voice rang out, then, "Can I take your life?" The sound of footsteps rang out as 3,000 elites of Yuxiong army strode out of the cabin. They quickly took control of the commanding heights on the deck and aimed their deadly dragon tendon bows at Wu Qi and his companions. Princess Zhang Li's face flickered slightly. The 5-colored divine ray behind her tumbled rapidly, transforming into a misty lotus-like energy that shielded her and Wu Qi. Before the wild laughter could stop, a figure flickered in the distance, and an arrow came whistling through the air. Wu Qi sighed softly and said in a low voice, "Get ready to fight to the death. The 12 supreme oracles have sealed off this part of the void, so there's no way we can escape. I hope His Majesty will discover the situation here and send reinforcements as soon as possible, otherwise." Child-seizing soul, what a petty trick. A strange laughter rang out of the skull. Who will know that I'm still a loyal subject of Du even after I kill you? In just a few words, Bai Huang Zongling had decided the fate of Wu Qi and his companions. King Yangshan could not help but burst out laughing. "Who do you think you are, Bai Huang Zongling? Can you decide what kind of fortune I'll have after my death? I'm loyal to Du, and I've done countless meritorious deeds. Nothing I've done is shameful. Even if I die, I'll be reincarnated into a wealthy clan of Du and enjoy a lifetime of wealth. Who are you to decide my fate?" He laughed mysteriously, then cursed in a low voice, "King Yangshan, you'll be a pig and a dog for all eternity. King Yufeng, you'll be a chicken and a duck for all eternity. King of East Sea Prefecture, you. He, how dare a lowly person like you get involved in such a thing? You won't be reincarnated, and your soul is reserved for someone else. As for this little girl, I'm a little interested in her." But suddenly, thousands of windows opened on both sides of the ship where Wu Qi and his companions were. 3,000 soldiers of the right army of Yuxiong army, armed with strong bows and crossbows, unleashed a barrage of arrows at King Yangshan's private army, whose faces were expressionless. They were all armed with dragon tendon bows specially made for Yuxiong army by Du, and each of them could only be drawn with the power of star shifting. Similarly, the specially made arrows flew with incredible speed and power. Even gold immortals who were equipped with protective immortal artifacts would have a hard time blocking the attacks of these arrows. Wu Qi coughed a few times, coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood, and slowly opened his eyes. Shaking his head, Wu Qi stared feebly at the black skull and said with a cold grin, "I don't even have the chance to enter the transmigration. What about you?" King Yangshan cursed under his breath, then took a step to the side and stood in front of Wu Qi and his companions. As a top expert of Hungmeng Panga Heaven, King Yang Shan's muscles and bones were extremely tough, and he was many times stronger than Gao, whose cultivation base was only in the second Panga Heaven. The guards on the flying ships noticed that something was wrong. Just now, when Princess Zhang Lu and Bai Huang Zongling exchanged blows across the void, several of their ships were destroyed. Now, the private guards of King Yang Shan's mansion were rushing toward the ship. The black skull hovered in front of the crowd, its deep eye sockets suddenly spewing out two red ghost flames. The skull opened its mouth and laughed evilly, its two rows of black teeth clacking against each other, making it look ferocious. A deep, old voice rang out from inside the skull, "Why are you so loyal to Du? Things should not have turned out this way." On average, these elite soldiers of Yuxiong army could shoot 100 arrows in every second, and the strongest among them could shoot 1,000 arrows in a row in every second. The terrible rain of arrows sealed off every inch of space around the ship, piercing through the bodies of a large number of private guards brought by King Yangqiu. Each of the arrows tore open a hole the size of a basin in their skin, and anyone who was hit by them would die. Wu Qi opened his mouth, and a beam of green light shot out. In the next moment, 4 Kunwu swords floated in front of Wu Qi. Wu Qi threw them to King Yangshan, Gao, and Princess Zhanglu, then grabbed one himself and said, "Your Highnesses, Zi Xian, I'm too badly injured to form the fiend-slaying sword formation. Let's fight them to the death. These swords are the divine artifacts of the sacred emperor, and these vile people." He he. Princess Zhang Li's technique of using the heavenly tune of nature to break the evil spell was extremely ingenious. 19 explosions rang out in a row, and all of Princess Zhang Li's talismans were destroyed. Princess Zhang Li's face was pale, but her lips were strangely red as if they were smeared with blood. A trace of blood slowly dripped from the corner of Princess Zhang Li's mouth. She gritted her teeth and said, "Although it's just a small trick, this man's cultivation base is too high. Zi Xian can't beat him." Viscous black liquid dripped down from the skull's mouth. Every drop of liquid that fell onto the deck of the flying ship would slowly expand, gradually growing into a human-shaped skeleton that was about 3 meters tall. These skeletons were slender and emanated an evil aura. They looked no different from human bones, except that instead of palms, their arms ended in 2 sharp bone blades, each about 6 feet long. King Yangshan took a deep breath, took out a dozen bone talismans in a row, and slapped them on himself and Gao. "Bai Huang Zongling, has Du done anything wrong to you? Your clan has been Du's subject for generations. Why did you do this?" The talismans exploded, enveloping King Yangshan and Gao with dozens of layers of bright light. Their souls, which had been severely injured by the boy's cries just now, were rapidly recovering. A shrill laugh rang out of the black skull. "How could your majesty possibly know what's going on here? Don't be fooled by the earth-shattering battle between this little girl and me just now. The people in Liangzhu don't know what's going on here. I have at least an hour, more than enough time to kill all of you." Chapter 824. Wu Qi's reaction was very fast. Abruptly, he raised his hand and grabbed the arrowhead. As soon as his palm touched the arrow, Wu Qi sensed that the force in the arrow was incredibly strong. With his current strength, even if he cracked his own bones and pretended to be seriously wounded, he could crush 2 or 3 stars with just one grip. But, the arrow did not budge at all. The friction between the arrow and Wu Qi's palm produced a lot of sparks, and with a murderous aura, it went straight toward Wu Qi's forehead. King Yangshan smiled, then nodded to King Wei Shan and said, "It doesn't seem easy to kill me, does it?" Wu Qi's scalp went numb. Was this the trick of the Buddhist League? How did they make the souls of these bodhisattvas reincarnate into King Wei Shan's clan? It was not only because the Buddhist League could interfere with part of the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, but perhaps someone in King Wei Shan's clan was working with them. King Wei Shan snorted coldly, then gritted his teeth and said, "Well, it's just a natural phenomena medallion. Let's see how you can resist my natal blood soul arrow." King Yangshan and Gao burst out laughing at the same time. "Sure enough, let's see how long it takes them to kill us." King Yangshan shook his head and sighed in disbelief. You, King Wei Shan, have guarded the imperial palace for generations, but you, King Wei Shan's face turned dark as well. He stared fixedly at the natural phenomena medallion hovering over Wu Qi's head, and only breathed out a heavy sigh after a long while. Closing his eyes, King Wei Shan gritted his teeth and said, "Damn you. Although I've only used 1/10 of my strength, I can't believe you managed to avoid a strike from the Skyblast bow. Should I say you're lucky, or you're just too tough?" Wu Qi unconsciously bent his waist backward. The arrow tore open a large piece of flesh on his palm, bringing along a stream of blood as it flew past between his eyebrows. The arrow swept across Wu Qi's eyebrows with a sharp gust of wind, tearing open a thin wound between his eyebrows. Blood continuously spurted out from the wound. Wu Qi straightened his body, and the blood slowly flowed down his face. As King Wei Shan roared, the meridians on his right wrist suddenly exploded, and a large amount of blood spurted out along with a sizzling noise. Within a blink of an eye, half of his blood gushed out and condensed into 4 red arrows in front of him, emitting a boundless killing intent. Princess Xianglu gave a soft cry, and the 5-colored divine ray spun rapidly behind her. Below the flying ship was a dense jungle, and suddenly, the jungle within thousands of miles of it began to sway even though there was no wind. Accompanied by the rustling of waves, a rich green life force gushed out of the jungle, transforming into a green torrent that leaped into the air and kept pouring into King Yangshan's body through the top of his head. The black skull opened its mouth, but no words came out. With a loud cry, King Wei Shan loosened the bowstring, and the 4 blood-colored arrows whistled through the air with thunderclaps. King Wei Shan sighed softly, then shook his head and said, "As for me, I'm the reincarnation of the Golden Boy, a disciple of the Lord Buddha, Amitabha. All I have to do is wait for this life's great achievement and accumulate boundless virtues, so that I can step onto the lotus throne and attain the golden body of Buddha before I return to my throne. From then on, I'll hold a Buddha in my hand, rule over 3,000 Buddhist kingdoms, and attain the golden body of immortality and indestructible." For a clan like King Wei Shan, every time a son of their lineal descendant was born, the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials and the Secret Palace would carefully examine the origin of their souls, lest they were incomplete or possessed by someone. But, such a strict surveillance method had failed to prevent the reincarnation of a member of the Buddhist League. What had gone wrong? As King Yangshan cried out in alarm, a tall, burly man in a lavender brocade robe landed quietly on the deck. The burly man had a solemn and resolute look on his square purple face, and his long, narrow eyes were slightly narrowed, giving off a dangerous feeling that he was a scheming man. The wooden bow in his hand was nearly 10 feet tall, and the transparent bowstring, which was as thick as a thumb, was bouncing faintly. Clearly, it was the arrow shot by this bow that had seriously wounded King Yangshan just now. Wu Qi answered in a low voice, then opened his mouth and spat out the natural phenomena medallion. A large cloud of smoke quickly drifted out of the medallion and spread out around them, quickly forming a circle about 100 feet in circumference. Mountains and rivers could be vaguely seen in this small cloud. At a glance, there were hundreds of layers of smoke and clouds, and so were the mountains and rivers. With the divine power of the natural phenomena medallion, the distance of 100 feet was separated by tens of thousands of miles of void. On King Yangshan's left shoulder was a fist-sized wound, and now the flesh and bones around the wound were growing rapidly. Wrapped in a strong green fluid, it only took the span of a few breaths for the wound to be completely healed. King Yangshan touched his shoulder and looked at Princess Xianglu in surprise. "Wonderful. I can't believe I've recovered 70% of my strength," he said with a smile. King Yangshan's face turned extremely unsightly. He covered the fist-sized hole in his shoulder with one hand, then gritted his teeth and looked up at the sky as he cried out, "It's you. King Wei Shan, how could you be with them? You, no matter who you are, it shouldn't be you." King Wei Shan smiled and bowed apologetically to King Yangshan, then slowly produced an 8-foot-long bone arrow as thick as a thumb and knocked it on the bowstring. A thunderclap rang out as King Wei Shan pulled the strangely large wooden bow in his hand. The bowstring crackled like a thunderclap, and the bone arrow shot straight toward Wuqi's forehead with a bright beam of light. Standing behind Wuqi, Princess Zhonglu smiled reservedly and said, "Now let's see how long it will take them to kill us." With a flash, the arrow appeared directly in front of Wuqi and his companions, each aimed at their hearts. King Yangshan was about to say something when Bai Huang Zongling's strange howl rang out from the Black Skull. "Why are you still talking to him, King Wei Shan? Quickly kill them and capture that woman for this old man. If you keep talking, I'm afraid the human emperor will find out that something is wrong and send his revered elders from the secret palace. That will be a big problem." As soon as these people and skeletons stepped into the cloud, their bodies shrank rapidly, turning into the size of needle tips in the blink of an eye and sinking into the boundless mountains, rivers, cities, towns, and villages. Wuqi's natural phenomena medallion had fused with the essence of the Pearl of Shen from the ancient era, so it was filled with boundless illusions. The skeletons were only acting on instinct, but as soon as the 3,000 soldiers of Yu Xiong army entered the cloud, they were immediately bewitched by the illusions. As for the thousands of black skeletons, they were killed by Princess Zhonglu with a great number of thunderbolts she had gathered. Countless tiny bolts of lightning were darting back and forth in the cloud, turning into a dense electric net that came whistling down. The black skeletons had a cultivation base no weaker than that of the second Panga heaven, and their bodies were condensed with evil magic. But, under the attack of countless thunderbolts, they only lasted less than 10 minutes before they were completely blown up. As King Wei Shan scolded generation after generation, King Yang Shan's face grew more and more unsightly. Gao's eyes slowly widened, and in the end, his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. So many generations of King Wei Shan were reincarnations of the Buddhist League. 7 generations of King Wei Shan had served 3 generations of human emperors, including the current Emperor Haozuan. Yet, their most trusted Imperial Guard leader was actually a reincarnated Buddhist League Bodhisattva. Skyslayer Bao, split the void, slay the devil, go. King Wei Shan used so much force that his skin cracked and cracked. Wuqi gave a strange laugh. As he opened his eyes, Pangu's sacred energy rolled over from all directions and kept seeping into his body. The sound of bones healing could be heard coming from inside his body. While extracting Pangu's sacred energy to pretend to heal his wounds, Wuqi cancelled the damage caused to his body by the spirit snake tail cutting technique. All his bones healed rapidly, and the aura emanating from him grew stronger and stronger, emanating a threatening aura like an unsheathed blade. King Yangshan clenched the Kunwu sword and stood in front of Wuqi. The bow in his hand is the Skyslayer bow, he cried out in a low voice. It's made by one of the 5 ancient emperors himself, and has the power to shoot down the stars, the sun, and the moon. You must be careful, King of East Sea Prefecture. You can't take it head-on. King Wei Shan smiled, squinted at King Yangshan, and said with a long sigh, 7 generations ago, the last King Wei Shan was a Buddhist. 7 generations ago, he was the reincarnation of the Buddhist League's King Bodhisattva. 6 generations ago, he was the reincarnation of the Buddhist League's Vajra King Bodhisattva, and 5 generations ago, he was the reincarnation of the Buddhist League's King Bodhisattva. King Wei Shan carefully knocked 4 blood-red arrows on the bowstring of the Skyslayer bow, then pulled the bowstring with all his strength and slowly pulled it to half full. Suddenly, Bai Huang Zongling's voice rang out, "Don't waste time, golden boy. The human emperor has discovered that something is wrong. He is mobilizing the revered elders of the secret palace around him, and he has also sent his eunuchs to inform those old fools in there. I'll do my best to buy them some time, so you kill them quickly. We can't let them enter Liangzhu. Especially that king of East Sea Prefecture, he knows too much." Wuqi chuckled. Wisps of green ghost fire burst out of his eyes, and in the illusory formation, all kinds of wine, women, and avarice were produced. The 3,000 soldiers of Yu Xiong army were ignited by the 5 thieves in their bodies, and then triggered by Wuqi's evil magic. The Yin fire quickly rose from the soles of their feet and burned their bodies to ashes in a short time. Countless miserable howls rang out as the 3,000 elite soldiers of Yu Xiong army were burned to ashes by Wuqi's Yin fire. When he wounded King Yangshan and Wu Qi just now, he had only pulled the bowstring back slightly by an inch. But now, he had pulled it to half full, which meant that the force he used was more than 1,000 times stronger than before. And when he bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a large amount of blood on the bowstring gradually emitted a faint red light, and 2 extremely long runes slowly emerged from it. A large piece of skin was scratched on his palm, and a few strands of flesh and blood from Wu Qi's palm stuck to the arrow. He had used all his strength, but he could not stop the arrow. King Wei Shan's eyes turned red with anger. He casually pointed a finger at the void that was hundreds of feet wide and covered by the smoke and cloud emitted by the natural phenomena medallion, then cried out in a low voice, "Go!" Accompanied by Bai Huang Zongling's shrill howl, more than 1,000 black skeletons and 3,000 elite soldiers of Yu Xiong army rushed into the smoke and cloud emitted by the natural phenomena medallion. King Yangshan and Gao were overjoyed. It was true that the Sky Blast Bow was a divine artifact made by the 5 ancient emperors, but the natural phenomena medallion was also a legacy of the sacred emperor Xuanqiu, one of the 5 emperors. With the protection of this artifact, even if King Wei Shan's cultivation base was higher than King Yangshan's, and the Sky Blast Bow's power was even more amazing, King Wei Shan might not be able to get what he wanted today. The burly man, who was called King Wei Shan, twitched the bowstring with his fingers and made a deep buzzing sound. At the same time, he sneered disdainfully and said, "Why can't it be me? If there can be a so-called rebel in Yu Xiong army, why can't it be me?" Chapter 825. Ignoring the 10,000 miles of void created by the natural phenomena medallion, the blood-red arrow leaped through the void and came in front of Wu Qi and the others. It was at this point that they saw the different responses of Wu Qi and his companions. Gao, who had the weakest cultivation base among them, threw himself flat on the ground. Suddenly, a thick shield crafted from a green turtle shell appeared over his body. King Yangshan gave a loud cry as a large sheet of blood-red light burst out of his fists and slammed them toward the incoming arrow. Princess Zhongli's body swayed, and then she quietly disappeared amidst the 5-colored divine light, not making any contact with the arrow. Meanwhile, Wu Qi kicked King Yangshan with one foot and kicked Gao in the waist with the other. Meanwhile, he exercised the dragon kill, causing his body to suddenly grow to about 1,000 feet tall, with countless thick and heavy purple-gold dragon scales emerging all over his body. Lying on his stomach on the deck, Gao's shield, which was crafted from the shell of a spirit turtle, was silently pierced through by the blood arrow. Trembling slightly, the arrow adjusted its direction, making a 90-degree turn and shooting straight toward his heart. Instinctively, Gao sensed a blazing killing intent coming at his back. He roared in despair and tried his best to push himself off the deck with both hands, trying to move his vital organs away. However, Wu Qi kicked him in the waist and sent him flying a few feet away. The arrow came whistling over and pierced Wu Qi's calf. At the same time, Wu Qi kicked King Yangshan in the waist, sending him flying 80 feet away. The arrow that was about to pierce through King Yangshan's body also pierced through Wu Qi's thigh, and all the blood flowed into Wu Qi's body. Princess Zhonglu roared furiously in a low voice. Her avatar of the god of thunder appeared amidst the 5-colored divine light, and with a wave of her hand, 1,000 thunderbolts as thick as water buckets smashed down and hit King Wei Shan, who was gasping for breath. King Wei Shan was caught unprepared by the thunderbolts. His energy was almost exhausted, and he was badly battered by the continuous thunderbolts. His clothes were torn to shreds, and his skin was torn apart by the violent thunderbolts, revealing his slightly purplish-golden bones. As Wu Qi was busy trying to rescue King Yangshan and Gao, both his legs were pierced by the arrow, and he had no time to dodge the incoming arrow. Fortunately, he had transformed into a dragon man, and his body had expanded to about 1,000 feet tall. So, the blood arrow that was aimed at his heart only hit his lower abdomen, leaving a hole the size of a large bowl on his abdomen. The penetrative force of the arrow pierced through his body and came out from his back. Even though he was busy, he was still able to control his muscles and bones to wiggle and move the internal organs near his lower abdomen. Apart from 2 layers of muscles and 6 layers of dragon scales, all the important organs in his lower abdomen had avoided the blood arrow. The whole looked ferocious, but in fact, it did not cause too much damage to Wu Qi. On the contrary, the arrow shooting toward Princess Xianglu suddenly lost the aura of Princess Xianglu. Unable to lock onto its target, it turned straight toward Wu Qi, piercing through Wu Qi's left rib and coming out from the 3rd rib on his right. Fortunately, Wu Qi reacted quickly, but the arrow still grazed Wu Qi's lungs and liver, nearly piercing through these 2 important organs. Coughing, Wu Qi coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered a step back before he finally steadied himself. His legs, abdomen, and ribs had all been pierced through. For life-threatening blood arrows had actually been absorbed by him alone. The terrifying power of the Skyslayer Bao had truly made him experience it firsthand. The dragon scales on his body were strong enough to withstand dozens of full-force attacks from Wu Qi and remain unscathed, but they were easily pierced through like wooden planks in front of the arrow. How could the power of Sky Blast Bao be so terrible? Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi crazily mobilized the Pangu sacred energy around him to heal his wounds. While bombarding King Wei Shan with thunderbolts, Princess Xianglu also mobilized the life force of green wood that kept seeping out from the dense forest below and injecting it into Wu Qi's body. With the 2-pronged approach, the wounds on Wu Qi's body quickly healed, and his muscles were rapidly regenerating. The only thing that made Wu Qi secretly happy after being hit by the 4 blood arrows was that the hardness of his bones had exceeded his expectation after he absorbed the remains of the ancient immortal in the ghost realm. He was hit by 2 arrows in his legs, but the blood arrows only broke his muscles and exploded when they hit his leg bones. They did not cause any damage to his bones at all. It could be seen that King Wei Shan could not hurt Wu Qi's bones even with the half-drawn Skyblast Bao. The strength of his bones had far exceeded his current realm. King Wei Shan, who had almost exhausted his energy, was almost killed by the thunderbolts. When he pulled the bow, the powerful counterforce of the Sky Blast Bao cracked his skin, and his muscles were full of internal injuries. The powerful thunderbolts triggered by Princess Xianglu kept bombarding him, sending his flesh and blood flying in all directions. He was in great pain. At this moment, he was unable to resist Princess Xiangli's attack at all. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound. King Wei Shan simply recited an incantation and shouted sternly, "Blood curse, activate." With the incantation, the remaining blood of the blood arrows that had just shot into Wu Qi's body suddenly erupted. The evil curse power, which was like a scourge, turned into countless ferocious beasts that ran wildly through Wu Qi's body, wreaking havoc through his blood vessels and meridians, and devouring his essence and blood. Wu Qi could not help but feel amused. If it were someone else, it would be a great trouble to have such a devouring poison curse enter their body. They might even be killed on the spot by this insidious trick. However, King Wei Shan possessed the nature harmonization technique and a wisp of the first innate thieving energy hidden in his body. Did he want to devour Wu Qi's essence and blood, or did he want to send himself a gift? Without making a sound, Wu Qi exercised his cultivation technique. The chaotic energy mixed with the thieving energy circulated 9 times in his body, and the blood essence that had invaded his body was instantly refined by him. This was an arrow launched with half of King Wei Shan's blood essence, so at least 60% of it had seeped into Wu Qi's body. As King Wei Shan's cultivation base was 1 grade higher than King Yang Shan's, this blood essence was a great tonic for Wu Qi. His wounds healed rapidly, and even his broken dragon scales were rapidly regenerating. His face glowing because of the nourishment of the huge amount of blood essence, Wu Qi smiled and crooked his finger at King Wei Shan. "What other tricks do you have? Bring them all on." This Sky Blast Bao is not bad. I can't believe the natural phenomena medallion couldn't stop it. Could it be that Emperor Ku's cultivation base is stronger than Emperor Zhuanqu's? King Yang Shan, who had been kicked away by Wu Qi just now, took a step forward and came next to Wu Qi. "It's not that Emperor Ku's cultivation base is stronger than Emperor Zhuanqu's," he said in a deep voice. "It's just that this Sky Blast Bao is a weapon specially designed for killing. The 5 ancient emperors of the human race, including the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan, have all left a restrictive talisman on it. That's why it can ignore the natural phenomena medallion's defense and kill us directly. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. A treasure crafted by Emperor Ku himself, and which the 5 ancient emperors had all left a restrictive talisman on it. Squinting at the struggling and wailing King Wei Shan, he took a sudden step forward with the Sky Blast bow in his hand. The little black skull keenly noticed his movement. It moved a few feet to the side and stopped in front of King Wei Shan. "Are you trying to seize the Sky Blast bow, King of Donghai Province?" he said with a strange laugh. "Are you trying to seize the Sky Blast bow? You do have some good eyesight, but how can you get this bow?" Bai Huang Zongling opened his mouth and breathed out a plume of black smoke to protect King Wei Shan, who had more than half of his muscles carbonized. "Golden boy," he said coolly, "if we don't fight with all our might, they will really break through here and rush to Liangzhu. I'm just a wisp of my divine sense in this skull, so I can't fight them. Whether we can kill them or not depends on your ability." The black smoke was extremely tough. Princess Zhanglu had bombarded it with dozens of thunderbolts in a row, but they could not break it. She shook her head and whispered to Wu Qi, "The void here is sealed, and all the natural energy has been expelled, while the power of thunderbolts has been reduced to a minimum. I can only hurt him, but I can't kill him." That was what she said, but the avatar of the god of Scourge, shrouded in Princess Zhang Li's 5-colored divine light, reached out a finger stealthily, performed a strange incantation gesture, and quietly cast a curse on the black skull. The divine power of the god of Scourge was the most obscure, and with only a wisp of Bai Huang Zongling's divine sense here, he did not have the ability to find out what Princess Zhanglu was up to. A wisp of the curse of the god of Scourge surreptitiously seeped into the black skeleton and merged with Bai Huang Zongling's clone, becoming one with it. King Wei Shan struggled to his feet and said in a hoarse voice, "Ask them to come and help me." Them King Wei Shan mentioned were the 12 supreme oracles who had sealed off this part of the void in the distance. But Bai Huang Zongling refused his request without hesitation. "We can't touch the 12 space-sealing formations," he said coldly. "Otherwise, the human emperor will be alerted immediately. Now, he only suspects that something has happened here. Before he gets any news, he won't act rashly in order to calm the hearts of the people. If any aura leaks out here, the human emperor will come here immediately. At that time, we will all be in big trouble." After taking a deep breath, Bai Huang Zongling snapped, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" King Wei Shan gave the black skull a venomous glare, then gritted his teeth and said, "Fine. Immortal Haoshu, I'll remember you." King Yang Shan and Gao exclaimed in unison, while Wu Qi scratched his head in frustration. 8 generations of King Wei Shan's bloodline were reincarnations of Buddhists, but this Bai Huang Zongling was actually the reincarnation of an immortal. What the hell was wrong with Great Yu? Why were there all kinds of people in this world? Wu Qi could tell that even if the 12 supreme oracles could move, they would not help King Wei Shan, not to mention that they had to maintain the space-sealing formations. Bai Huang Zongling seemed to be deliberately forcing King Wei Shan to fight desperately. Was this some kind of small friction between the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League? But King Wei Shan's next move made Wu Qi have no time to think about anything else. King Wei Shan took a deep breath. A beam of auspicious light rushed up from the top of his head, amidst which, 1,000 feet tall 8-armed golden ape quietly emerged. This was the heaven-ripping divine ape, a divine beast famous for its boundless strength, and its strength was only inferior to a few rare divine beasts with ancient bloodlines. The sky-ripping divine ape beast's soul slowly shrank until it was only 2 meters tall. The beast's soul narrowed its eyes and grabbed King Wei Shan's body. Then, it placed the upright King Wei Shan on the bowstring of the Skyslayer bow as if he was a long arrow. The beast's soul bared its fangs and slowly pulled the Skyblast bow until it was 3/4 full. King Wei Shan recited an incantation in a low voice. Drop by drop, blood oozed out of his body and slowly covered his skin with a thick layer of blood. Fresh blood covered his body, making him look no different from a sharp arrow. Wu Qi and the others were speechless. Using himself as an arrow, King Wei Shan was really going to fight desperately. A loud twang rang out from the bowstring, and King Wei Shan howled as he was shot out by his own beast soul. Chapter 826. With his body as the arrow and his life as the arrow, all his spirit, energy, and spirit had been fused into the arrow. It would either kill the enemy or himself. As soon as the arrow was released, King Wei Shan's beast soul turned into a beam of golden light and fused into his body. Abruptly, the giant arrow transformed into a beam of blood-red light that was about 10 feet thick and over 1,000 feet long, flashing across the void and coming in front of Wu Qi and the others. The first to bear the brunt of the attack was King Yangshan, who was holding the Kunwu sword. King Yangshan let out a long roar. A plume of cloud rose from the top of his head, from which Yazi, one of the 9 sons of the dragon, roared and rushed out, holding a fierce knife shrouded in blood-red light. As soon as his beast soul appeared, a fierce killing intent swept out in all directions. After a long roar, Yazi plunged down and suddenly merged with King Yangshan's body. All of a sudden, King Yangshan's body swelled up like a steamed bun. By the time the arrow was less than 3 inches away from him, King Yangshan had turned into a meatball less than 10 feet tall, 10 feet wide, and 13 feet thick. The astonishingly huge lump of flesh had 2 extremely long arms, and each arm was astonishingly thick and strong. 2 streams of hot white smoke puffed out of King Yangshan's nostrils as he swung the Kunwu sword and slashed it down at the incoming sword light. With a crisp clang, the Kunwu sword slashed into the arrow formed by King Wei Shan's body. It went all the way from the arrowhead to a depth of 3 feet. Blood sprayed out in all directions, and the sharp Kunwu sword was sent spinning away. A loud rumble rang out from King Yangshan's right arm as it was torn to pieces by a great force from his fist to his shoulder. Flesh and blood sprayed out in all directions, and King Yangshan, who had merged with his beast soul, shrieked in pain. The blood-red light flew past and brushed past King Yangshan's shoulder. Half of King Yangshan's huge body was blown away, leaving a gash about the size of a water tank on his body. The right half of his body was almost gone, exposing all his pink lungs, and blood gushing out of them like cheap spring water. Howling, King Yangshan fell to the ground, his life force rapidly dissipating. The cultivation techniques of the human race were different from the immortal arts of the immortals. No matter how strong a human warrior was, even one of the strongest experts in Hongmeng Pangu heaven like King Yangshan, his life would be in danger from such a serious injury. But the immortals were different. The source of their power was their powerful immortal soul. Even if their fleshly bodies were reduced to ashes, as long as a wisp of their immortal soul remained, they would never die. Oftentimes, immortals would be decapitated by a sword, and the head would fly away with a beam of light. Even if half of the body was left behind, it was not a big deal. But human warriors did not have such divine abilities or secret arts. Almost half of King Yangshan's upper body was destroyed. It was an injury that would kill a mortal instantly, but it was also fatal to him. King King's body, as he stood, and could, as long as he could keep his body pressed against the ground. Chi as he could. If they were on the ground, as long as King Yangshan could stick his body close to the ground, he could still send Panga's sacred energy into his body through the earth meridians to heal himself. But they were on a flying ship, nearly 100 miles above the ground. Therefore, he could not use the last and strongest life-saving technique of the human race. Father! Gao cried out involuntarily. He swung the Kunwu sword and slashed at the arrow that King Wei Shan had transformed into. But Wu Qi grabbed him by the neck and threw him far away. With a flip of her hand, Princess Zhonglu injected a great plume of green life force into King Yangshan's body, quickly sealing the bleeding wound. At the same time, a purple gleam flashed in Princess Zhongli's eyes, and a rich Panga's sacred energy materialized in the air. Even mortals could see it roiling around them with their naked eyes. Princess Zhonglu pointed a finger at King Yangshan and cried out softly, "Ji." In the next moment, streams of Panga's sacred energy kept pouring into King Yangshan's body, healing his broken body at an incredible speed. In just 2 seconds, his broken fleshly body was as good as new, although it was not as strong as his original fleshly body, which had been thoroughly tempered. But King Yangshan had survived. He was so badly wounded, and he did not take any life-saving spirit pills, but he had survived. Bai Huang Zhongling screamed, "How is this possible? What magic are you practicing? How can you gather Panga's sacred energy to heal someone?" Bai Huang Zhongling was on the verge of a mental breakdown. No oracle of Deyu had ever been able to do this, and even the supreme oracle of Deyu, who cultivated both fleshly body and magic, could not gather Panga's sacred energy and inject it into a wounded man's body. The nature of Panga's sacred energy was so strange that only those who practiced the body-tempering technique of the human race could sense it and absorb it into their bodies to strengthen their fleshly body or repair their injuries. What Princess Zhanglu practiced was clearly the magic of the primordial Tao of divinity of Deyu's Directorate of Celestials. So, how could she summon Panga's sacred energy? If all the oracles of Deyu had mastered this magic, wouldn't it mean that all the warriors of Deyu were immortal on the battlefield? Just think about it. On the battlefield with the Immortals or the Buddhist League, when the warriors of Deyu were injured by powerful immortal magic, the oracles of Deyu would absorb a great amount of Panga's sacred energy and fuse it into their bodies, and the warriors who had just fallen to the ground would immediately rise to their feet and fight again. What a terrifying scene it would be. Kill this woman. Kill her. Golden boy, kill her. Bai Huang Zhongling screamed at the top of his lungs. Before his voice could fade away, Bai Huang Zhongling cried out again, "Quick! Kill them all! A few old fogies from the secret palace are coming this way." While Bai Huang Zhongling was screaming like a madman, King Yangshan and Gao's eyes turned green as they screamed, "Wonderful! What kind of technique is this? King of East Sea Province, if you can offer this magic to Deyu, we will make an exception for you and promote you to the rank of Prince of Mountain and Water, which can only be conferred by members of the imperial clan." Bai Huang Zhongling thought of the heavy casualties that might be brought to the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League if this magic was used by Deyu on the battlefield, and so did King Yangshan and Gao. If Princess Zhongli's magic could be learned by all the oracles of Deyu, the combat prowess of the Great Yu army would increase by more than 10 times. In other words, it was equivalent to Deyu expanding its army by 10 times without consuming more resources. It was an amazing feat. With this credit, it would not be an exaggeration to promote Wu Qi to the rank of Prince of Mountain and Water, which could only be conferred by members of the imperial clan of Deyu. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. He roared with laughter and said, "Wonderful. This is a simple method. I'll just ask Zi Xian to teach it to the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials." Kill. Before Wu Qi could speak, the arrow that King Wei Shan had transformed into had approached Wu Qi's body. A shrill whistle rang out of the blood-red light as King Wei Shan recited a vicious incantation and forced out all his spirit, energy, and soul. The arrow suddenly grew several times larger, and like a mad blood-red fiend dragon, it was about to devour Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu at the same time. Wu Qi raised the Kunwu sword, gripped the hilt with both hands, and swung it down at the blood-red light amidst a vast purple mist. King Wei Shan screamed hoarsely. Suddenly, he burned part of his soul and pushed the speed of the arrow to the limit. There was no turning back for this arrow. He had to kill Wu Qi so that he could not bring back the complete information he had obtained from King Baishan till Yangzhou, and he had to kill Princess Zhanglu so that she could not teach the deadly method of controlling Panga's sacred energy to the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials. Just as the Kunwu sword was about to collide head-on with the arrow, Wu Qi suddenly gave a strange laugh. A beam of starlight shot out from the top of his head, and Dark Yin's celestial tower flew up and shattered the void. With a flash, Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu moved hundreds of feet forward amidst the starlight, dodging King Wei Shan's deadly blow. Even though there were 12 supreme high priests sealing off this part of the void, this space was already as solid as an iron wall. But, with the small world transformed from the natural phenomena medallion neutralizing the power of the 12 space-restricting formations, Wu Qi could still travel a short distance by relying on the power of Dark Yin's celestial tower. As soon as he moved, the arrow that King Wei Shan had transformed into swept past where he was just now, shooting forward with a dazzling beam of blood in the air. He rushed past without hesitation, no longer having the strength to turn back. Damn it! Immortal Haoshu, is this the so-called 12 space-restricting formations? King Wei Shan's hysterical roar came from afar. He had burned his soul to speed up the arrow, but at this moment, he no longer had the strength to turn it around. So, he could only watch helplessly as the arrow carried him forward, constantly consuming what little strength he had left in his body. The black skeleton opened its mouth and did not speak for a long while. It was beyond his expectation that Wu Qi could still travel by tearing the void. Before Bai Huang Zhongling could react, Wu Qi had already rushed out of the area covered by the natural phenomena medallion, raised the Kunwa sword, and slashed it down at the skull. A green light flashed, and the tiny skull broke into two pieces soundlessly. A sharp whistling noise rang out abruptly, and the broken skull exploded into a clump of twisting dark smoke, which condensed into a pitch-black, ferocious and twisted face of a baby. It opened its mouth and flew towards Wu Qi's heart. Before the manifested curse could approach Wu Qi's body, Princess Zhangli gave a cold snort and grabbed the tiny clump of black smoke. A large sheet of lightning flashed in her palm as she shattered the curse bit by bit. Bai Huang Zhongling was shocked. Although the skeleton he possessed had been destroyed, he still let out a loud roar across the void. What are you waiting for? Kill them now. Do you really want us to be hunted by Diyu all over the world? All of a sudden, the 12 supreme towers that sealed off the void thousands of miles away flashed and teleported to the side of the flying ship where Wu Qi and the others were. Their deep chanting brought a gust of chilly wind and blew toward Wu Qi and the others. An evil force filled the void, causing the light in the surroundings to suddenly dim and distort. Both space and time were frozen, and Wu Qi and the others were sealed on the flying ship, unable to move. The 12 supreme oracles had joined forces. Before they could launch their attack, the momentum of their chanting was suffocating. Even with Wu Qi's cultivation base of an 8th-tier primordial immortal, he could not withstand the terrible pressure. Just as the 12 supreme oracles struck with all their might, a beam of starlight shot over from a distance and came to Wu Qi and the others in the blink of an eye. Emperor Haozuan, with the starlight flickering in all 360 acupoints of his body and silver-purple light radiating from all over his body, had come to the rescue. He gently pushed a palm toward the void and uttered a soft incantation. The 12 supreme towers shattered at the same time, and the supreme oracles inside the towers howled miserably as the curse they had cast backfired on them, causing them to cough up blood and fall to the ground. All of Diyu's supreme towers were buried with vicious restrictive spells when they were crafted, which were known only to the human emperor and the first master of the secret palace. They were Diyu's most secret and deadly means of control. The 12 supreme oracles did not have time to prepare for the sudden change. Emperor Haozuan had only activated the restrictive spells laid in advance in the supreme towers, and without using any of his own strength, he had beaten the 12 supreme oracles to death. Rebels have infiltrated Yuxiong army. Wu Qi cried out hoarsely. King Wei Shan is the reincarnation of the Buddhist League's Golden Boy, and Bai Huang Zhongling is the reincarnation of Immortal Haoshu from the Celestial Court. Emperor Haozuan's face fell. His body trembled, and his facial muscles twitched, making him look like a ghost. Chapter 827. Liang Zhu was firmly locked down by a black, translucent light shield that was tens of thousands of miles thick. With Liang Zhu as the center, the formation, which measured hundreds of millions of miles in diameter, was fully activated. A tremendous and bizarre force was coiling in the void like countless invisible pythons, completely sealing off the entire Yuxiong plain. In the void, nearly 1,000 sky-reaching towers were suspended in mid-air, unscrupulously releasing a suffocating pressure. An old man sat cross-legged on top of each supreme tower, their eyes flickering with ghostly fire and their bodies emanating a strong aura of ghost gods. They did not look like living beings at all. Bai Huang Mo, the first Grand Elder of the Secret Palace, stood on top of a supreme tower in the middle with a small pot of foul-smelling potion in his hands, gnashing his teeth and stomping his feet while cursing something. The sleeves of the old men sitting cross-legged on top of nearly 1,000 supreme towers were embroidered with at least 3 black emblems of supreme towers. These old men were the strongest experts of the revered temple of the Secret Palace in Diyu, and also a group of dying men who did not have long to live. Normally, These revered elders would take secret medicines and enter a state of hibernation in cold caves specially constructed by the secret palace. Unless they encountered a major crisis that could topple Great Yu, they would never come out of their seclusion, because every time they went out, their remaining lifespan would be depleted rapidly. There was no doubt that this was a crisis that could shake the foundation of Diyu. Nearly 1,000 revered elders had been dispatched, which was nearly 10% of all the revered elders in the entire revered temple who had entered hibernation. Coupled with the fact that the strongest defensive formation in Liangzhu had been activated, this force was more than enough to deal with any unforeseen events. Because of years of studying all kinds of bizarre magic, the flesh and blood of these revered elders sitting cross-legged on top of the supreme towers had become inhuman, and because of the long hibernation, they had become gloomy and gloomy. But, the divine will released from their souls had become scorching hot and anxious. Their divine will kept scanning the void hundreds of millions of miles around Liangzhu, stirring up a scorching wind and making the atmosphere in Yuxiong Plain more and more tense. Outside Liangzhu, hundreds of military camps of Yuxiong army were guarded by revered elders from the secret palace. All the captains and soldiers were ordered to drop all their armors, weapons, and talismans, and sit cross-legged in the camps naked. If anyone dared to disobey, they would be killed without mercy. Some twisted or festering corpses had been hung outside many barracks. These horrible corpses belonged to the rebels of Yuxiong army, who had tried their best to resist, but were easily killed by the honorable masters. In Liangzhu, in the imperial palace of Diyu, in the great hall on top of Mount Torch Dragon, Emperor Haozuan sat on a high throne with a gloomy face, surrounded by starlight. There seemed to be countless huge stars colliding and rubbing against each other amidst the dense starlight, producing deafening noises. The terrible pressure emanating from Emperor Haozuan had blanketed the entire great hall. With his own strength, he alone was suppressing all the ministers and representatives of the noble clans in Diyu, a total of more than 300,000 people. Led by the new first master of the secret palace, Gaochen Buyu, hundreds of revered elders of the secret palace hovered in the great hall, their bodies shrouded in a ghostly aura and their eyes flickering with a green gleam. They looked down at the high-ranking figures of Great Yu. Gaochen Buyu was the first master of the Hall of Revered Elders of the Secret Palace, and the previous first master of Diyu was Baihuang Zongying, Baihuang Zongling's brother. But now, Baihuang Zongying had been dismissed on the spot by Emperor Haozuan, his cultivation base sealed, and thrown into the divine prison of the Secret Palace to await trial. Even Baihuang Mu, who led the revered elders of the secret palace to keep an eye on the surroundings, would have been thrown into the divine prison as well, had he not been a direct descendant of the patriarch of the Baihuang clan, and had Gaochen Buyu vouched for him. Even so, Baihuang Mu was being closely watched by dozens of revered elders from the Hall of Honorable Elders. Feeling deeply humiliated and uneasy, Baihuang Mu stomped his feet and cursed loudly, cursing all 18 generations of Baihuang Zongying and Baihuang Zongling's ancestors in turn. With a pale face, Wu Qi stood on Emperor Haozuan's left side. At this moment, he was the King of East Sea of Diyu. The title of King of East Sea Prefecture and King of East Sea differed only by a single word, but their power, status, and territory were worlds apart. The King of East Sea was the second-class Prince of Diyu, and only members of Diyu's imperial clan could be conferred the title of King of Mountain and Water. As a commoner, Wu Qi was conferred the title of King of East Sea, which was equivalent to raising his title by more than a dozen ranks. It was also because Emperor Haozuan wanted to reward Wu Qi for his contribution. If Wu Qi had not received such sensational information from King Baishan, Diyu would have been overthrown without even knowing what was going on. Of course, Princess Zhanglu, who stood next to Wu Qi, had also contributed a great deal. She had given Emperor Haozuan the technique of using the primordial Tao of divinity to propel Panga's sacred energy, which had undoubtedly increased the military strength of Diyu by more than 10 times, and the credit went to Wu Qi. Princess Zhanglu only received the title of Revered Elder of Diyu's secret palace, and the real benefits brought by the credit naturally went to Wu Qi. King Yangshan and Gao stood on Emperor Haozuan's right. Both of them looked worried, but the worry could not hide the glow on their faces. Naturally, they could not get such a great promotion as Wu Qi, but they knew that with the great purge of Deyu, their real power and status in Deyu's imperial court would be greatly expanded. Emperor Haozuan sat expressionlessly on his throne and did not say a word for a full quarter of an hour. The enormous natural energy under Liangzhu and the power of the stars falling from Yuxiong Plain were all drawn over by the huge formation and injected into Emperor Haozuan's body. At this moment, Emperor Haozuan's body had become one with the natural energy of Yuxiong Plain. Through the mystic art of the imperial family, his overall strength had broken through to a realm that no one present could imagine. Only Wu Qi had a clear concept of this realm. It was still a far cry from the realm of Yuxiong Plain. But, with the endless natural energy in Yuxiong Plain, Emperor Haozuan had used a mystic art to forcibly push himself to the realm of Dao breaking, infinitely close to the peak level of the realm. It was a typical means of proving the Dao with strength. At this moment, Emperor Haozuan was the embodiment of the natural energy of the entire Yuxiong Plain, and with every move he made, he could exert a power that was strong enough to fight against the heavenly Dao. In other words, at this moment, Emperor Haozuan had become the incarnation of the heart of the ancient great saint, Pangu, and possessed a trace of Pangu's true power. It was a power that the immortals and Buddhas of today could not resist. Even if it was only a trace of Pangu's power, it was a mighty force that could create a world. With such power, Emperor Haozuan was able to control everything in Deyu. In the face of absolute power, plots and tricks were nothing. He had even activated Liangzhu's ultimate defensive formation and ordered the Temple of Revered Elders to send out large groups of revered elders to suppress the enemy, not because Emperor Haozuan was not strong enough to suppress these disloyal people, but because he was afraid that they would escape. Now, the whole of Yuxiong Plain was completely sealed off, and Emperor Haozuan had merged with a huge spirit cave. With a palm of infinite power, Emperor Haozuan looked down condescendingly at the courtiers and leaders of the aristocratic clans in the Great Hall. The rage and killing intent in his eyes could be clearly sensed even by a stone. The terrible pressure gradually condensed into a tangible mass, turning into a sheet of red light that pressed down from the top of everyone's head. The souls of human warriors and oracles were no different from those of ordinary people. At most, the souls of oracles who specialized in magic were dozens of times stronger than those of ordinary people, and that was their limit. In the face of Emperor Haozuan's spiritual pressure that was close to the peak level of the Dao-breaking realm, those courtiers of Deyu who had no ulterior motives could still hold their breath, but those who had ulterior motives were sweating profusely, and some even rolled their eyes and almost fainted. The sad thing was that under such a terrifying pressure, there was no way to faint even if one wanted to. Their souls were like bugs in amber, embedded in them by the tremendous pressure, unable to move, and even deprived of the right to faint. At last, someone could not bear the terrible pressure. A clan leader of a branch family of the ancient sacred emperor, Suiren clan, let out a deep roar. His muscles bulged as he suddenly lunged at Emperor Haozuan. "I just don't want to die. Why do we have to live, grow old, get sick, and die when we have so much strength and power? Why can't we enjoy all this forever?" With a flick of Emperor Haozuan's finger, the gray-haired old man froze in midair. Although he was the clan leader, his cultivation base was only at the level of a mid-tier sun oracle. Faced with the tremendous power of Emperor Haozuan and Yuxiong Plain, he had no strength to resist. With a faint smile on his face, Emperor Haozuan waved his hand, sending the old man flying backward out of the great hall while coughing up a mouthful of blood. The entire clan of Suiren Gong, a branch family of Suiren clan, said Emperor Haozuan in a flat tone. "All in-laws in the clan shall be executed. Half of their wealth shall be given to King Yang Shan, and the other half to the King of East Sea." Gaochen Buyu bowed slightly in response. With a wave of his hand, two revered elders immediately rushed out of the great hall with a large group of ferocious private guards of King Yang Shan's mansion. Emperor Haozuan could not help but sigh as he looked at the scene before him. Yuxiong army could not be mobilized until all the rebels were found out, and the mighty human emperor had to rely on the private guards of a loyal king. How could he endure such a situation? But at the same time, Emperor Haozuan could not help but rejoice. If Wu Qi had not pestered King Baishan and made him reveal his weakness, only heaven knew how far things would have gone in the end. Emperor Haozuan could not help but shudder at the thought that something had gone wrong with Yu Xiong army, the most important force in Diyu, and when he remembered that something had gone wrong with the Baihuang clan, the #1 clan of Diyu's oracles, he felt a lingering fear that he had just escaped from death. At the thought of this horror, Emperor Haozuan could not help but turn around and slap Wu Qi on the shoulder. "It is my honor to have such a loyal subject as the King of East Sea." Wu Qi bowed slightly to show his modesty, but Emperor Haozuan suddenly burst into a hysterical rage. He jumped to his feet, pointed at the courtiers, and bellowed, "You have been important subjects of the human race for generations. You have enjoyed the offerings of countless people of Diyu, and yet, you have done such a thing. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves?" A tremendous pressure swept through the great hall like a hurricane. Tens of thousands of Diyu's subjects fell to their knees, and some of them even bled from their 7 orifices and suffered serious injuries to their internal organs. All the people who knelt on the ground were guilty. In the face of the spiritual pressure of a peak-level Tao-breaking expert, they could not keep the secrets in their hearts. Of all the courtiers in the court, 15% had something wrong with them. This meant that 15% of the powerful clans of Diyu had something wrong with them. Emperor Haozuan's face was pale, and it was even more unsightly than when he heard Wu Qi's cry when he went to rescue Wu Qi. The faces of those courtiers of Diyu who could still stand on the spot had changed as well. 15% of the powerful clans of Diyu, how many things were they involved in? Chapter 828. As the thunderclouds pressed down rapidly, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu stood under them with hundreds of generals from East Sea. Their bodies were illuminated by lightning, and the flickering light made their faces flicker, making them look like evil ghosts. 3 days had passed since Emperor Haozuan had summoned all the courtiers in Liangzhu for a grand court meeting, and the purge of the rebels in Diyu had just begun. At the moment, Wu Qi was leading hundreds of East Sea generals and more than 100,000 soldiers to besiege the headquarters of Ji clan, a famous aristocratic clan in Diyu. Ji clan was a noble clan with the bloodline of the sacred Emperor Xianyuan, a branch of Diyu's imperial clan. It was a powerful clan that almost single-handedly controlled all kinds of craftsmanship workshops in Diyu's Directorate of Celestials, and was responsible for the production and storage of all Diyu's armaments. Because of this, Ji clan's wealth was second only to Emperor Haozuan's in Diyu, and it was the most extravagant and decadent among all the aristocratic clans in Diyu. The long period of enjoyment and carefree life had almost turned Ji clan into a pure merchant clan. They did not care about the power struggle in the imperial court, nor did they care about anything outside of Diyu. They only cared about whether their mansions were luxurious, whether their concubines were beautiful, and whether their maids were enchanting and charming. They devoted all their energy to enjoying themselves, so Ji clan was almost the first clan to betray Diyu. For so many years, Ji clan, relying on their advantage of being in charge of the production of armaments in Diyu, had secretly stockpiled a large number of rare materials and traded them to the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. These materials were considered precious on Pangu continent, and in outer heavenly realms, they were precious treasures that would make people risk their lives for them. But, Ji clan had secretly sold them to outsiders. As the price for betraying Diyu, the people of Ji clan were given a great number of life-prolonging spirit pills, as well as countless enchanting and beautiful fairies as their exclusive property, which they enjoyed wantonly. On top of that, the patriarch and elders of each generation of Ji clan would be secretly taken away when their lifespans were about to come to an end. Those primordial immortals would personally give them cultivation base, abolish the cultivation technique of the human race that they had been cultivating since they were young, and reforge their fleshly bodies in the 8 treasures lotus throne of the Buddhist League, transforming them into cultivators. In the Celestial Court, there was an immortal family in charge of forging immortal artifacts in the Celestial Court. Their surname was Ji. It was a complete betrayal. Because of the betrayal of Ji clan, the immortals of the Celestial Court would have at least 3 to 5 extra materials to craft primordial artifacts every eon. Many of them could not be found in outer heavenly realms, and were sold to the Celestial Court by Ji clan in secret. The patriarchs of the clans, who were frightened by Emperor Haozuan's boundless killing intent and had obediently knelt on the ground to confess their crimes, had been imprisoned in the secret palace's divine prison, and were being interrogated about what they had done. Before Ji clan, more than 30 powerful clans had been slaughtered, and because of their wealth, Emperor Haozuan had specially ordered Wu Qi to personally lead an army to wipe them out. All the wealth obtained from the annihilation of Ji clan would be exclusively enjoyed by Wu Qi, the king of East Sea. Obviously, this was an extra reward from Emperor Haozuan to Wu Qi, and Wu Qi could not refuse. He hastily mobilized hundreds of East Sea generals with the cultivation bases of the Second Panga Heaven, and tens of thousands of soldiers of the East Sea of varying strength from the armory of Deyu's Directorate of Celestials to attack Ji clan. Now, Ji clan did not have a supreme oracle. After all, it had transformed into a merchant clan, and the strongest experts in the clan were a few son-in-law with the cultivation bases of the Second Panga Heaven who had married into their clan. Such a clan could have been easily slaughtered, but no one had expected that Ji clan had laid out a powerful formation in their foundation, which was obviously created by an immortal. The ancestral land of Ji clan was located in a basin about 200 miles in circumference, surrounded by 3 small mountains. Originally, there were only about 1,000 core members of Ji clan and tens of thousands of servants living in this small basin. But since the head of Ji clan was thrown into the divine prison, and Emperor Haozuan had found a way to exterminate Ji clan, more than 500,000 members of Ji clan's lineal and collateral branches, as well as servants and guards, had now taken refuge in this ancestral land. A faint golden light enveloped the whole basin, and on top of each of the 3 mountains was a cloud of purple mist. Each cloud of purple mist carried 9 round mirrors that were thousands of feet tall, shining with a cold light. Large bolts of lightning could be seen flowing around the edges of these bronze-colored mirrors. Occasionally, when these mirrors vibrated, countless beams of golden light would shoot out from them. The golden light emitted by the 27 mirrors wove into a large net of light in the void, cutting everything in its path to pieces. The broken bodies of nearly 1,000 East Sea soldiers were scattered all over the ground. It was all thanks to these golden lights. As Wu Qi led the army to attack Ji clan, Huang Liang, who was in charge of supervising the battle, gave the order, and more than 100,000 soldiers formed a neat formation and went straight for Ji clan's ancestral land. As a result, the mirrors on the 3 mountains suddenly rose up, and a large sheet of golden light tore through the air. More than 1,000 soldiers of Dong Hai who were at the forefront were cut into fist-sized pieces of meat by the golden light before they could even scream. As the golden light suddenly struck, Huang Liang hastily ordered the army to retreat 3 miles. Hovering in midair, Wu Qi opened his chaotic divine eyes and saw a fat, middle-aged man angrily scolding a few pale-faced young men in Taoist robes above a great hall in the heart of the valley. Obviously, when the few young men saw the army of East Sea approaching, they had hastily activated the formation, and the golden light had only killed about 1,000 soldiers. If the army of East Sea could invade deeper, the formation would have killed at least 80% of the hundreds of thousands of East Sea soldiers. That was what the fat, middle-aged man was scolding. They, the Ji clan, had missed an opportunity to inflict a heavy blow on Wu Qi's army of East Sea. Snorting coldly, Wu Qi murmured in a low voice, "Only about 1,000 soldiers have died. You should be glad that your Ji clan is lucky. If you had really inflicted a heavy blow on the army of East Sea, it would not have been just a matter of wiping out your Ji clan. Even if you die, there are many ways for you to die. For killing the soldiers of East Sea, I'll give you a death sentence for the time being. If the soldiers of East Sea suffer any more casualties, it will be hard for you to die even if you want to." Princess Xianglu nodded seriously as well. A little annoyed, she glanced at the remains of over 1,000 soldiers, clenched her teeth and murmured in a low voice, "With such a heavy casualty, how much will the compensation be?" Even Wu Qi was taken aback by Princess Xiangli's words. But, the furious Princess Xianglu had already pressed both hands down, and the thundercloud that blotted the sky smashed down like a wall from the sky. The thundercloud covered an area of several hundred miles, and when it was less than 10,000 feet from the ground, it suddenly shot out countless bolts of lightning as thick as water tanks. For a moment, it was as if a forest of lightning had appeared in the sky above Ji clan's residence. Strong bolts of lightning pierced through the golden formation and blinded the eyes of countless people of Ji clan in the basin. 27 mirrors began to tremble violently. Under the terrible attack of Princess Zhongli's thundercloud, they whined as if they could not withstand the heavy load. At most, the formation could use the endless energy under the plane of Yuxiong to fight against enemies as strong as gold immortals. But in the face of Princess Zhonglu, a primordial expert, its power was not enough. Amidst the mournful cries of the mirrors, countless beams of golden light shot up into the sky, trying in vain to tear the dense thundercloud in the sky. However, the avatar of the god of thunder hovering above Princess Zhonglu raised both hands and waved them toward the basin. Immediately, countless thunderclouds came whistling over from all directions, shooting out more and more bolts of lightning as they grew thicker and thicker. The bolts of lightning converged into an ocean of plasma, soaking the entire ancestral mansion of Ji clan. Standing on a hill and supervising the battle, Huang Liang abruptly raised the long knife in his hand and cried out, "Mistress is mighty and powerful, and her thunder magic is amazing. She can cleanse the evil aura. You clowns, why don't you surrender now? What are you waiting for?" Hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the East Sea raised their weapons and cried out. Amidst their frenzied cries, the 27 mirrors could no longer withstand the bombardment of the thunderbolts summoned by Princess Zhonglu. The energy in the mirrors was shattered, and cracks spread across the thick and heavy mirrors like a spider web before they exploded with a deafening rumble. Wu Qi gently waved his hand. Immediately, hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the East Sea swarmed forward and poured into the basin like a tide. Countless members of Ji clan cried out in despair and fled in all directions like headless flies. But, with the formation destroyed, how could they, with their low cultivation bases, have a chance to escape? Meanwhile, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out 36 kunwu swords, which transformed into huge swords of light several miles tall and plunged into the ground around the basin, sealing it off completely. The soldiers of the East Sea rushed into the basin with their weapons raised high and began slaughtering the people of Ji clan. Men, women, old, and young, regardless of their status, everyone was killed on the spot, leaving no one alive. Blood flowed all over the ground, gradually turning into a few streams that merged into a nearby river. An hour later, the river, which was more than 10 miles wide, was dyed red. Flames rose into the sky from all directions as the despairing members of Ji clan set their ancestral mansions on fire, turning both themselves and their ancestral mansions into ashes. But, as the buildings in Deyu were all made of boulders, the effect of burning was not very good. It was unknown how much merman oil had been wasted by the people of Ji clan to start such a towering fire. Similar fires were rising in countless places near and far. The aristocratic clans loyal to Deyu raised the butcher's knife against those who had betrayed Deyu. Just as Wu Qi was slaughtering Ji clan, tens of thousands of other clans were struggling and howling miserably in the raging fire and blood. Baihuang clan, the former #1 oracle of Deyu, had all been killed, except for Baihuang Mu and a few other members of the collateral clans. Hundreds of supreme oracles from Baihuang clan had fallen at the hands of revered elders from the secret palace. Faced with the siege of revered elders, they were so vulnerable after losing their supreme towers, the strongest fortress. Wu Qi glanced around. With his chaotic divine eyes, he could see what was happening in a very long distance. In the barracks of Yuxiong army, he saw large groups of soldiers howling in despair being escorted to the edge of a huge pit. The private guards of those aristocratic clans loyal to Deyu had raised their weapons, killed these soldiers who had disobeyed Deyu, and thrown them into the pit. Large-scale resistance broke out in some barracks, but revered elders from the secret palace immediately carried out bloody suppression on these soldiers who dared to resist. In the face of the destructive means of the supreme oracles, the so-called resistance of Yuxiong army was so weak and laughable. All of a sudden, the East Sea army that had rushed into the depths of Ji clan's ancestral mansion burst into deafening cheers. "Your Excellency, we've found the treasury of Ji clan," cried Huang Liang. "So many treasures, so many good things." Wu Qi burst into laughter as he pulled Princess Zhonglu and flew swiftly towards the ancestral mansion. Chapter 829. He did not know how many of the prefecture overseers and marquis families of various states were involved in this, and it was a complicated task that needed to be slowly investigated afterwards. The betrayal of 15% of the families in Liangzhu alone proved that the foundation of Deyu had been corrupted. Everyone in Deyu felt an imminent pressure. Had all the people who had betrayed Deyu really been found out? Was there really no one who had escaped? As for all kinds of upper-grade and top-grade immortal stones, there were countless of them. Tens of thousands of storage bracelets were filled with mountains of immortal stones, stacked on rows of wooden shelves by Chi-Chi. When Wu-Chi casually picked up a few storage bracelets and sent his divine sense into them to find out how many immortal stones were in them, even with his current cultivation base, Wu-Chi's heart could not help but beat violently. It was too scary. How did the Ji family collect so many immortal stones? The number of immortal stones in each storage bracelet was not calculated by the number of pieces, but by the number of cubic kilometers. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that 40% of the soldiers in the Yuxiong army had been purged was enough to make all the officials in the court of Deyu who knew about the huge size of the Yuxiong army feel dizzy when they saw this number. 40% of the soldiers in the 5 armies had been purged. How could it be described as a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood? Casually pulling out a light crossbow placed on a shelf, Wu-Chi gently pulled the string. The force on the string was 3 times that of a crossbow of the same law equipped in Deyu. Wu-Chi could not help but curse. Had the Ji family gone crazy? In addition to all kinds of metal ores, there were also countless roughly processed spirit herbs in the treasure vault of the Ji family. With the status of the Ji family in Deyu, it was a piece of cake for them to collect all kinds of spirit herbs. Presumably, these spirit herbs would eventually fall into the hands of the celestial court and be turned into spirit pills that could prolong one's life for the Ji family. Ji's family had a talent for being a rat, just like how they had secretly ruined Deyu's foundation. The treasure vault of Ji clan was a vast underground space, stabilized by at least 12 supreme oracles. It measured nearly 10,000 miles in both width and length, and was about 100 miles in height. It was filled with all kinds of rare materials, some of which even Wu-Chi, who had inherited the scroll of stealing, could not recognize. After half a month of killing, Emperor Haozuan once again summoned his subjects to the Great Hall on top of Mount Torch Dragon. After that, Emperor Haozuan issued a series of edicts. Among them, the most eye-catching one was that Gao, King Yu Feng, was to be adopted by King Wei Shan, who had died of a sudden illness. Everyone knew what the sudden death meant, and no one would disobey Emperor Haozuan's decree on this matter. Among these spirit herbs, there were even hundreds of supreme-grade herbs that could be used to concoct the primordial gene pill. These herbs were rare even on Panga continent, and most of the time, one had to risk their life to collect them in the primitive lands that had just emerged on the outskirts of Panga continent. Ji clan must have paid a hefty price to collect these spirit herbs. After scanning the entire treasure vault with his divine sense and making a rough count of the astonishing wealth in it, Wu-Chi pondered for a moment, then flicked his sleeve and put everything in the vault into his interstitial world. His eyes flickered with a strange gleam as he laughed in a deep voice. Yes, the natural treasures here are enough to lift the black celestial forbidden curse for all the members of the imperial clan and great clans of the 6 states. But, why should I let these people benefit for no reason? There was no doubt that the purge triggered by King Baishan's failure to assassinate Wu-Chi had dealt a heavy blow to Deyu. 15% of the great clans in Liangzhu had betrayed Deyu, which had dealt a great blow to Deyu, both in terms of actual strength and popular sentiment. After looting all the treasures of Ji clan, Wu-Chi left the place with the East Sea Army, which had been completely turned into a land of death. A thick layer of land had been scraped off the basin where Ji clan was located. Ji clan could only blame themselves for being too extravagant. They had paved the ground with supreme-grade jade, and in the core of the jade were spirit herbs that could transform one's body, such as jade essence and jade paste. At Wu-Chi's order, the floor of Ji clan's house had been dug clean. But now, all of this belonged to Wu-Chi. The ordnance that had been forged could arm Wu-Chi's army of 1 million soldiers in the East Sea Army to the teeth, and the natural treasures, immortal stones, and energy stones could satisfy Lao Ai's appetite. With so many natural treasures and immortal stones, it was enough for everyone in the 6 dynasties to lift the black celestial forbidden curse. Liangzhu can no longer fall into chaos. The investigation in Liangzhu has come to an end. Compared with a dozen days ago, there were significantly fewer subjects in the Great Hall. All of them had been wiped out along with their clans. Even if some of them knew nothing about the betrayal, when the nest was overturned, no eggs could remain intact. So, they were completely wiped out along with their clans. Princess Zhanglu was not interested in the ordnance that had been processed into finished products. She just looked excitedly at the raw materials that were piled up like mountains, her pretty face full of a charming smile. Countless rare natural treasures were piled up here, and square metal ingots forged from various metal ores were neatly stacked there. All the materials were glowing with a charming luster, and their value was immeasurable. Ying Zheng and the others must still be working hard to develop their forces and collect natural treasures. But now that Dayu's attack on immortals and itinerant cultivators was unprecedentedly strong, how could they find enough natural treasures to satisfy Lao Ai's huge appetite so easily from all over Dayu? As for lifting the black celestial forbidden curse? That would depend on Wu Qi's mood. After half a month of chaos, the great purge of Dayu against the rebellious clans was finally completed. All the civil and military officials in the imperial court exclaimed in surprise. Here, Wu Qi saw many Dayu ordnance that he had seen before, many of which were used by the soldiers of the East Sea. For example, there were all kinds of huge bolts that were extremely powerful and deadly to even immortals, and they were piled up like mountains. Moreover, compared with Dayu's standard ordnance, if Dayu's standard ordnance was only a sharp weapon that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times, the ones here were at least divine weapons that had been tempered thousands and thousands of times. Everyone bowed their heads, and no one dared to look up at Emperor Haozuan. Emperor Haozuan, who had been criticized as weak and incompetent for so long, had finally completely reversed his courtiers' impression of him with a bloody purge, completely casting his prestige and murderous aura. Perhaps in terms of virtue and prestige, Emperor Haozuan was not as good as the ancient sacred emperors like the Yellow Emperor, but he was definitely the human emperor who struck fear into the hearts of his subjects the most in the history of the human race. Emperor Haozuan sat on a high throne, emanating a terrible pressure as he looked down at all his subjects. There was a hint of suspicion in his eyes when he glanced at them, and only when he saw Wu Qi, Princess Zhanglu, King Yangshan, Gao, and a few others would there be a hint of warmth and trust in his eyes. When Wu Qi walked into the treasury of Ji clan, he could not help but suck in a cold breath even though he was an experienced and knowledgeable man who had seen countless rare treasures. How many precious materials had these damned Ji clan embezzled from Dayu? And how many shady deals had they made behind closed doors to accumulate such a fortune? Whether it was the materials or the craftsmanship, the ordnance here was 100 times better than those used by the Great Yu army. The appearance of these ordnance was also slightly different from those used by Dayu. They were engraved with complex and exquisite patterns of various colors, and had openings for embedding immortal stones and energy stones, as well as blank spaces for laying immortal formations and restrictive spells. As long as the immortal craftsmen of the Celestial Court engraved formations on these ordnance and embedded them with matching immortal stones and energy stones, they would be transformed into the weapons of the Celestial Court's army. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court, Lord Baoang, requests an audience with you. Wu Qi could not help but suck in a cold breath. How determined were these people from Ji clan to do such a thing? There were 83 types of pearls condensed from innate energy, each of which could be used as the main material for crafting a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact. There were 45 extra-large turtle shells used to craft the jade armor dark turtle flying ship, each of which could be used to craft at least tens of thousands of top-grade defensive immortal armors. There were at least tens of millions of sword embryos and weapon embryos, and as long as they were filled with new formations, they would become qualified inferior-grade gold immortal artifacts. Thoroughly purge all the provinces, Emperor Haozuan said coolly, kill all those who are related to those traitors. King Yangshan will be in charge of this. As the King of East Sea is loyal to Dayu, I'll allow you to expand your army by 10 million in the East Sea provinces, and they will only be mobilized by my decree. After massacring Ji clan, Wu Qi ran around with the hundreds of thousands of East Sea soldiers, wiping out 7 or 8 clans who had betrayed Dayu. These clans were the kind of clans that had no experts, but possessed noble ancestry, wielded real power in Diyu, and were extremely wealthy. Although Wu Qi was conferred the title of King of East Sea, he had no children now, and there was no clan to speak of. Therefore, after these clans were eradicated, their power would be divided among the other clans in Diyu, and Wu Qi would obtain the wealth accumulated by these clans over so many generations. It was Emperor Haozuan's intention to reward Wu Qi, and it was also a tacit agreement between the other clans and Wu Qi to take what they needed. If there was a fish that slipped through the net, who would it be? Someone who could remain undetected under Emperor Haozuan's spiritual pressure, which was close to the peak of the Tao-breaking realm. Once they made any move, they would surely cause severe damage to Diyu. But, even Emperor Haozuan dared not to pursue the matter any further. One reason was that there were no clues, and the other was that the purge had hurt Diyu deeply, causing the remaining clans to panic. So, he dared not pursue the matter any further. Wu Qi's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly stepped forward to thank Emperor Haozuan. By allowing the East Sea to expand its army by 10 million, and only obeying Emperor Haozuan's orders, it was clear that the emperor had taken precautions against Yuxiong army, and was cultivating an armed force loyal to him outside of Yuxiong Plain. This was good news for Wu Qi. As long as there was money and food to support an army, Wu Qi would never complain about having too many soldiers. Overjoyed, Gao stepped forward and kowtowed to Emperor Haozuan. But, before he could straighten up, a eunuch rushed into the great hall. After a long silence, Emperor Haozuan finally said something that set the tone for today's court session. The purge in Liangzhu had come to an end. Those who had not been purged, whether they were innocent or guilty, were safe now. Chapter 830. Like the other subjects of Diyu, Wu Qi turned to look curiously at the main entrance of the great hall. The crown prince of the celestial court was Ziwei Lingying, great celestial emperor. According to the setting of the almighty experts who founded the celestial court, he was a man who stood above tens of thousands of people, one of the few figures in the universe. His identity was so noble and special that when he came straight to Liangzhu from the 33 heavens, the eunuchs of Diyu could only enter the great hall and inform Emperor Haozuan of his arrival. The emperor was silent for a while. His eyes flickered with starlight for a long time, then he slowly raised his hand and said in a deep voice, "Summon." Wu Qi blinked. Emperor Haozuan had said the word "summon," which meant that he had put himself in the position of the Lord and regarded the crown prince of the heaven as his subject. Therefore, he had summoned him into the palace. The word "summon" perfectly reflected Emperor Haozuan's current state of mind. If the crown prince of the celestial court dared to cause any trouble, the emperor would not mind teaching him a painful lesson. Wu Qi even sensed the abnormal fluctuation of the power of the stars and the energy of the underground energy veins in the great hall. It was as if a super-nuclear bomb was brewing in Emperor Haozuan's body, and a terrible aura that made one's scalp go numb was spreading out from the emperor. Gao, who was kowtowing to express his gratitude, had risen to his feet and returned to Wu Qi's side. He lowered his voice and murmured, "The crown prince of the celestial court must be up to no good." Wu Qi nodded in agreement. How could the crown prince of the celestial court be up to no good? Before long, the sound of footsteps was heard, and a few eunuchs of Diyu led a handsome young man in a purple brocade dragon robe into the great hall. This young man wore a purple and gold dragon crown on his head, a purple embroidered dragon robe, and a pair of purple cloud sky boots on his feet. A purple jade belt was tied around his waist, and behind him, there was a Ganoderma-shaped purple cloud circling around. Within the purple cloud, there were two crescent moon-shaped purple swords that were translucent and looked as if they were made of crystal. Purple chi came from the east, indescribably noble. This young man's big and bright eyes were also filled with a deep and mysterious purple light. As his eyes flickered, an invisible aura of nobility assaulted one's face. If one was mentally unstable, it would be extremely difficult for him to stand straight in front of this aura. However, Wu Qi just wanted to laugh. What an extraordinary purple eggplant! Purple chi was a very noble color, and even when a primordial immortal cultivated to the peak of the realm, his immortal energy would be transformed into a rich purple chi. But, there was no need to make his whole body purple just to show his nobility and extraordinariness, was there? What an eggplant! Wu Qi chuckled. When Princess Xianglu and Gao heard Wu Qi's words, the more they looked at him, the more they felt that this crown prince of the celestial court, Lord Baoang, was no different from a purple eggplant, and they could not help but smile. Gao was able to restrain himself a little and just smiled, but Princess Xianglu burst out laughing, her eyes narrowed like crescent moons. Whether it was the emperor and his eunuchs of Deyu or the crown prince of the celestial court, Lord Baoang, who was not a man with profound cultivation base and sharp ears and eyes? Wu Qi's comment on Lord Baoang was clearly heard by everyone, and Princess Zhongli's laughter was particularly abrupt in the silent hall. Both the emperor and his eunuchs of Deyu smiled knowingly, while the face of Lord Baoang, who had been so reserved and arrogant, was now turning purple, looking more and more like a big eggplant. He glared angrily at Wu Qi, then gave Princess Xianglu a sideways glance. He did not think much of Wu Qi, as he thought Wu Qi was just an ordinary subject of Deyu. But when he saw Princess Xianglu, his eyes lit up instantly, and his pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip. Wu Qi frowned, snorted coldly, and glared at Lord Baoang with a stern look in his eyes. Lord Baoang made no secret of his greed for Princess Xianglu. He gave the Princess Xianglu a glance, then gave Wu Qi a contemptuous look, then turned to Emperor Haozuan and said indifferently, "Greetings, human emperor." Lord Baoang did not bow to Emperor Haozuan, but just nodded lightly. Emperor Haozuan raised his hand with a smile and said, "Somebody, give him a seat." Emperor Haozuan emphasized the word bestow very clearly. A few well-prepared eunuchs hurriedly brought out a heavy black stone chair and gently placed it under the dais where Emperor Haozuan's throne was located. They had deliberately placed the chair very close to the dais, so that if Lord Baoang were to sit on it, he would have to raise his neck at an almost 90-degree angle if he wanted to talk to Emperor Haozuan. Looking at the chair that was deliberately placed in the awkward position, Lord Baoang smiled faintly and waved his hand. Immediately, a golden chair made of various rare materials and covered with soft embroidery cushions appeared beside him. Slowly sitting down on the throne carved with 99 flying dragons, Lord Baoang smiled faintly and said, "Thank you, human emperor, for giving me a seat." Emperor Haozuan chuckled. He glanced at the empty black stone chair and said, "Deyu is poor, and it is not as good as the celestial court. I wonder what brings you here, your highness." "Well, just tell me the truth. I've killed too many people in Liangzhu recently, and I really don't have the mood to waste my breath on you." As the current human emperor, it was extremely serious for him to say something like this. A single wrong word from Lord Baoang could cause a huge contradiction. As if he did not expect that Emperor Haozuan would not give him face like this, Lord Baoang frowned and gave the emperor a few glances, then said slowly, "I'm here because of what has happened in Liangzhu these days. I don't know why Deyu has caused such a big mess in Liangzhu this time. The celestial court takes this matter very seriously. The human race is..." Before Lord Baoang could finish his long speech, Emperor Haozuan had already slapped the armrest of the throne lightly. A loud, muffled thud stopped Lord Baoang's words in his throat. Emperor Haozuan looked coldly at Lord Baoang and said with a sneer, "What does what happened in Liangzhu have to do with the celestial court? The human race is the foundation of us immortals." Lord Baoang said in a deep voice. "There are no immortals in Liangzhu." Emperor Haozuan said coldly. Lord Baoang laughed and said, "Your Majesty, you really know how to joke. It was only recently that the celestial court learned that a few of its fallen immortals have been reincarnated in Liangzhu." Emperor Haozuan's eyes grew even colder. Since they have fallen and reincarnated, they can just turn over a new leaf. Why does the celestial court still care about them? Lord Baoang took a deep breath, rose to his feet, and said in a deep voice, "As long as they are the subjects of the celestial court, even if they have fallen and reincarnated, the celestial court naturally has the responsibility to bring them back to the celestial court and help them recultivate and ascend the ranks of immortals." Without giving Emperor Haozuan a chance to speak, Lord Baoang said quickly, "Your Majesty, please take pity on me and hand over the few reincarnated immortals of the celestial court to me." There was a dead silence in the great hall. Emperor Haozuan looked up at the ceiling with narrowed eyes, and after a long time, he sighed faintly and said, "Do you want to die?" "Lord Baoang, if I kill you today, will the Celestial Court start a full-scale war with me, for you? Lord Baoang's jaw dropped, and he froze on the spot, unable to speak for a long time. King Yangshan sneered and said, "Which of the great Celestial Emperor of the Celestial Court and the Celestial Emperors of the 5 directions doesn't have many wives and concubines, and which of them doesn't have hundreds of princes? If you kill one, you can still have hundreds. I don't think the great Celestial Emperor is so stupid to go to war with me, for a son who is not important to him, right?" As soon as King Yangshan said that, all the civil and military officials in the hall burst into laughter. Some of the generals of Diyu, who had cultivated so hard that their brains had turned into muscles, laughed strangely as they gripped their weapons, ready to kill Lord Baoang on the spot. Since Emperor Haozuan had said so what if they killed Lord Baoang? It would have been better if Lord Baoang had not come, but now that he was here and had said such a thing, it was irrefutable proof that the rebellious clans in Liangzhu had something to do with the Celestial Court. Although the confession Diyu had now could prove that everything was related to the Celestial Court, the fact that Lord Baoang was here in person was like sending the proof directly to Diyu. Hundreds of thousands of people roared with laughter, and half of them were men who had cultivated their bodies and were full of energy. It was as if hundreds of thousands of thunderbolts had exploded at the same time, shaking the ancient Great Hall and causing it to rumble. Lord Baoang's expression flickered. Suddenly, he heaved a long sigh, cupped his fist at Emperor Haozuan, and said, "Please forgive me, Your Majesty. Since those fallen immortals have been reincarnated, they are Your Majesty's people, and their life and death are naturally under Your Majesty's control. The Celestial Court has no right to interfere." Emperor Haozuan looked coldly at Lord Baoang and cried out in a low voice, "It's good that you know. Those reincarnated immortals and bodhisattvas, they all deserve to die. So, they are dead, and their souls are gone, with no chance of reincarnation. Go back and tell your father that no matter what they want to do, you will take it." Clenching his fists tightly, Emperor Haozuan gritted his teeth and said, "No matter what you want to do, you'll have to step over our dead bodies." A fierce killing intent surged out of Emperor Haozuan's body. In the Great Hall, the faces of Diyu's subjects, including Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu, turned pale, and all of them shouted at Qi. For a moment, the killing intent of hundreds of thousands of people was like a mountain, blasting toward Lord Baoang at the same time. His face flushed, and a strange cracking sound was heard coming out of his body. All his internal organs were severely injured by the fierce killing intent. Even someone like the Lord Buddha, Amitabha, dared not face the killing intent of hundreds of thousands of great Yu's emperors and courtiers head-on, let alone Lord Baoang. Lord Baoang looked at Emperor Haozuan in horror. He took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled, and said coolly, "In that case, I understand. There is one more thing I want to see, the King of Han, Liu Bang, the special emissary of the Celestial Court. This is a private matter of the Celestial Court, and I wonder if Your Majesty can do me a favor." Emperor Haozuan stared at Lord Baoang for a long time, then slowly raised his right hand and said coolly, "Liu Bang is a subject of the Celestial Court, so of course you can see him, Lord Baoang. Go now, and after the meeting, please leave Yuxiong Plain as soon as possible, Lord Baoang. People of the Celestial Court are not welcome here." After the turmoil, Emperor Haozuan had ordered the killing of so many aristocratic clans who had betrayed Diyu. Diyu had fallen out with the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League, so it was meaningless to say anything nice. Therefore, Emperor Haozuan was not polite at all to Lord Baoang. Lord Baoang bowed deeply to Emperor Haozuan, then strode out of the great hall that made him extremely uneasy. Emperor Haozuan looked at Lord Baoang's back and said in a low voice, "I want to know what he said to Liu Bang." "Who can do that?" Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then took Princess Zhongli's hand and strode out of the hall. Chapter 831. With an unsightly face, Lord Baoang stepped into the chariot parked in front of the imperial palace of Diyu and cried out in a deep voice. 3 adult golden dragons flapped their wings, opened their nostrils, and breathed out 2 plumes of white smoke, stirring up a gust of wind as they slowly dragged Lord Boang's magnificent and huge chariot up into the sky. 3,000 heavenly soldiers, clad in purple and gold armors and armed with golden spears, rode on heavenly horses and took to the sky, surrounding the chariot and flying out of Liangzhu. When Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu walked out of the imperial palace, they happened to see Lord Boang's mountain-like chariot, carved with patterns of flying dragons, fly over the wall of Liangzhu and toward Baisha Bay. A few eunuchs of Diyu, riding on huge black-feathered vultures, were guiding the chariot. They were the guides specially sent by the chief eunuchs of the imperial palace for Lord Baoang, and at the same time, they were responsible for keeping an eye on him and not allowing him to wander around. Black-feathered vultures. Looking at the mounts of the eunuchs, Wu Qi could not help but smack his lips. He could not believe that these eunuchs could do something like this. When the crown prince of the celestial court came to visit, sending a few guides on mounts such as green dragons and phoenixes was already giving him face. But what was the big deal about sending a few black-feathered vultures? Black-feathered vultures had a special meaning in the Directorate of Celestials of Diyu. This stinky and ferocious bird was called the Bird of Death, the most unlucky creature. By using the Bird of Death to clear the way for Lord Baoang, it was a clear sign that the eunuchs were trying to bring bad luck to him. What a stingy Emperor Haozuan! Wu Qi did not believe that those eunuchs would have the courage to play tricks on him like this. It was clear that Emperor Haozuan's will was involved. Are they cursing Lord Baoang to die and be reincarnated as soon as possible? Shaking his head, Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu turned into an invisible gust of chilly wind and flew out of Liangzhu at the same time. A few shadows flashed across the sky above the imperial palace of Diyu. Along with a small whirlwind, a few old oracles in white robes appeared out of thin air. They glanced at Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu, who had disappeared, grinned in surprise, exchanged a glance, and murmured a few words of praise. Then, they too turned into a chilly wind and chased after Lord Boang's convoy. This was the second group of men sent by Emperor Haozuan. Wu Qi volunteered to find out the purpose of Lord Boang's trip. Although Emperor Haozuan praised Wu Qi's initiative, he could not put all his chips on Wu Qi. The second team was made up of a group of supreme oracles from the secret palace who were good at sneaking, breaking restrictive spells, and all kinds of secret techniques. Along the way, Lord Baoang and his companions came to Lu Bang's Changel Palace, leaving behind golden light and auspicious mist. As soon as they arrived, Lord Boang's eyes went wide. He stared blankly at the 5 3-mile-tall sentry towers in Wu Qi's mansion in front of Lu Bang's gate, and could not come to his senses for a long time. Not only Lord Baoang, but even the 3,000 celestial soldiers and heavenly generals who came with him were staring at the 5 unique sentry towers in the universe with their mouths agape, wondering what kind of person could do such a thing. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Lord Baoang said in a low voice with a wry smile, "The King of Han is suffering here. TSK, this man who was ordered to keep an eye on the King of Han is a talent. If I can recruit him, he will definitely make my brothers vomit blood in anger." Lord Baoang, his eyes wandering, cleared his throat, and the chariot landed straight in front of the main hall of Changel Palace. Lu Bang was already waiting in the square in front of the main hall with a group of his subordinates. When he saw Lord Baoang stride out of the chariot, Lu Bang hurriedly led his men to greet him, then respectfully knelt down and kowtowed to Lord Baoang according to the etiquette of the monarchs and subjects of the celestial court. Before Lu Bang could kneel, Lord Baoang had already reached out to stop Lu Bang. "You can't do that," he said anxiously. "The King of Han has worked hard on this trip, and you have done a great service to the celestial court. How can you bow to me like this?" Purple mist rose around Lord Baoang, turning into a purple mist that wrapped around Han Xin and the others, preventing them from kneeling down and kowtowing to him. Lu Bang smiled and bowed to Lord Baoang. "The crown prince is my..." Before Lu Bang could finish, Lord Baoang had interrupted him with a wave of his hand. Taking Lu Bang's hand with both hands, Lord Baoang said intimately, "The King of Han and I are brothers, so there's no need to be so polite. I've told the King of Han that you and I can't be so polite." Lord Baoang and Lu Bang put on a perfect performance of the friendship between a monarch and a subject, walking into the great hall hand in hand. Then, the heavy metal door was closed, shutting out the few eunuchs who had led the way, and Lu Bang's guards took them to the side to serve them tea. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu hurried into the hall before Lord Baoang and Lu Bang, hiding on a cloud at the top of one of the pillars. Lu Bang liked extravagance very much, so his hall was extremely magnificent. Inside, the light of treasures rose and clouds rose. These pillars were made of the finest jade, and smoke kept spewing out of them, which was the best cover for the plumes of smoke that Wu Qi had unleashed when he activated the natural phenomena medallion. Using the medallion to conjure a small world around him, Wu Qi moved his interstitial world and covered it with a thin layer of chaotic energy. Princess Zhanglu, on the other hand, gathered the smoke spewing out of the jade pillars to surround them, properly covering the small world. As soon as Lord Baoang and Lu Bang entered the hall, Han Xian closed the door himself. Zhang Liang took out a writing brush and kept waving it in the air, writing one ancient character after another, forbidden. The golden characters flew out at top speed and attached themselves to the walls, floor, and ceiling of the hall. The golden characters formed a thick layer of light, sealing off the hall so that not even a drop of water could leak through. Meanwhile, Xiaohe's eyes were bursting with a strange gleam, sweeping the hall dozens of times like a broom. Wherever the gleam passed by, the void would freeze like a stream in winter. If someone was hiding in the hall with an art of distorting the void, Xiaohe would have found him by now. Even so, Lu Bang dared not to be careless. He activated the sky-veiling flag of chaos and wrapped the hall tightly. Only then did he smile and say with relief, "My lord, there's nothing to worry about now." Lord Baoang snorted coldly. "Is it really that simple?" he said with a cold grin on his face. With a flip of his palm, Lord Baoang took out a pearl that was completely transparent and had no shape, and could only be found through the twisting light around it. He injected a stream of immortal energy into the strange pearl, and a dazzling light illuminated the whole hall. The light contained a terrible heat, which almost shattered the small world Wu Qi had conjured with the natural phenomena medallion. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu were hiding in this small world, and when the light swept over them, they both felt a burning sensation on their skin. It did not matter to Wu Qi because of his thick skin, but Princess Zhangli's delicate skin turned red. She gritted her teeth in annoyance and secretly made a mental note of Lord Baoang. The two of them joined forces to cast a secret technique to stabilize this small world, barely managing to maintain the small world that was on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, Wu Qi had spread a layer of chaotic energy around the outside world, absorbing 70% of the power of the light. Otherwise, their whereabouts would have been exposed. Lord Baoang produced the pearl, which flew around the great hall at lightning speed. When he found that there was nothing unusual in the hall, he nodded with satisfaction. Little did he know that his action had caused great harm to a few old oracles of the Directorate of Celestials living near Whitesand Bay. The few old oracles cast by a few secret magic were destroyed by the orb, and the exploding magic mirror nearly disfigured them. With a cold snort, Lord Baoang hung the pearl over his head and let the light illuminate the hall. "This is an extraordinary artifact crafted from the evil vanquishing eye of an ancient Buddha," he said coolly. "With it, no one can get close to the hall and eavesdrop on our conversation." Lord Baoang glanced disdainfully at the sky-veiling flag of chaos, which had turned into a dark cloud and covered the whole hall, and said proudly, "This flag is indeed an extraordinary artifact, but when it comes to the ability to isolate aura and prevent people from getting close to it, how can it compare with this treasure of mine?" Lu Bang flattered Lord Baoang with a smile on his face, nothing more than the cliché that only the virtuous could possess a supreme treasure. Wu Qi had heard all these words by heart, but Lord Baoang enjoyed Lu Bang's flattery very much. He held his head up proudly and enjoyed every word of the compliment. After a long while, Lord Baoang finally held his head up and asked, "What's going on? Why do you suddenly carry out such a purge? Father wants to know how much do you knows, and how many of our spies have they destroyed?" Lu Bang's face turned bitter. He sighed, shook his head and said, "Although it's King Baishan's fault, it's Buddha Fuda's fault in the final analysis. If he had killed the king of East Sea Prefecture and helped King Yang Qiu, Ji Tao, break through the Hongmeng Panga heaven realm, how could this have happened? Shaking his head, Lu Bang gritted his teeth and said, "My lord already knows what happened that day. If it were just Ji Tao's death, it wouldn't matter. But King Baishan, that bastard, overestimated his own strength and went to seek revenge on that boy, and was captured alive instead." Lu Bang told Lord Baoang about how he failed to avenge King Baishan, and how his soul was captured by Wu Qi and extracted a lot of information from him. Then, when Wu Qi went to Liangzhu to meet Emperor Haozuan, he was intercepted by Bai Huang Zongling and King Wei Shan whom Lu Bang had sent out, and lost 2 of their generals, which led to the Great Purge. As he spoke, Lu Bang kept looking up at Lord Baoang, carefully observing his face. With a cold snort, Lord Baoang said indifferently, "What's done is done. The point now is, how many are left?" At that, Lu Bang suddenly laughed. He rolled up his sleeve triumphantly, revealing a string of red jade beads on his wrist. 3 of the 12 red jade pearls had already turned black and had many cracks on them. However, there were still 9 pearls that were as red as blood and emitted a faint light. Lu Bang stuck out his chest and said with a smile, "Don't worry, my lord. Although there are many fools like King Baishan, there are also many smart ones. Apart from the immortals reincarnated from the celestial court, 9 of the 12 most important people I've been looking for in Diyu are safe and sound." Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu looked at each other in horror. A chill rushed up from the soles of their feet, making their hearts feel as if they were immersed in ice water. So many powerful clans had been slaughtered, and yet there were still so many important spies left. Apart from King Baishan and his son, who else was among the important people Lu Bang had been looking for? And these were just the people Lu Bang had found. How many of those immortals reincarnated from the celestial court and bodhisattvas of the Buddhist League were still lurking in the depths of Diyu? Chapter 832. Lord Baoang stayed in Lu Bang's place for only half a quarter of an hour. Without bidding farewell to Emperor Haozuan, he boarded his chariot and left Pangu continent under the escort of heavenly soldiers and generals, returning to the celestial court. As he watched Lord Baoang leave, Lu Bang, who had been calm all this time, breathed a heavy sigh of relief. The cold sweat that broke out suddenly soaked his clothes and made them stick to his body, looking very eye-catching. Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu also left Changle Palace. Lord Baoang and Lu Bang did not reveal too much valuable information. Lord Baoang just asked Lu Bang if the plan could still be completed on time, and Lu Bang just showed him the red jade beads and swore that there would be no delay in the matter. After that, Lord Baoang promised Lu Bang that once the plan was completed, Lu Bang would enjoy all the glory and wealth and have a high position in the celestial court. In return, Lu Bang expressed his loyalty to Lord Baoang in awe and trepidation. When Lu Bang presented Lord Baoang with 100 boxes of rare materials and spirit herbs produced in Yuxiong Plain, Lord Baoang ended his trip to Pangu continent contentedly. Before leaving, he told Lu Bang that the so-called great event would start soon, and that it would happen in 2 or 3 years at most. He must not delay it, or even he, Lord Baoang, would not let Lu Bang go, let alone the few celestial emperors of the celestial court. When Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu left Lu Bang with an escape art, Lu Bang was wiping his wet forehead as he gritted his teeth and said to Han Xian and the others behind him, "Life and death, good and bad, all depend on this. If it succeeds, you and I will share all the glory and wealth. If I fail, then I can only invite you to accompany me to the mortal world." Han Xian, Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Fan Kuai, and other Lu Bang's loyal subordinates, Chi answered. The killing intent emanating from them made Wu Qi, who had come to the gate of Changle Palace, look back in surprise. He saw the resolute light of faith in the eyes of Han Xian and the others. It was the kind of madness that they would either succeed or die trying. They're determined to do it. Wu Qi frowned and asked Princess Zhanglu in confusion, "But what do they want to do? Provoke civil strife in Diyu? Let those princes of Diyu rebel?" With Emperor Huang Xianyuan and Emperor Yan Shenong holding the fort, even if those princes of the imperial family rebelled, what benefits would they get? Princess Zhanglu shook her head. She was not interested in these complicated questions. For her, if these princes of the imperial family were not reliable, why not just kill them all or imprison them? Why did she have to make so many complicated questions? Wu Qi pondered all the way back to the imperial palace of Diyu. The first thing he saw was Emperor Haozuan and a few ministers of the imperial family who had proven to be absolutely reliable. There were also a few revered elders of the secret palace standing in a corner of the great hall, eyes narrowed, whispering to each other. No one knew what they were talking about. After telling Emperor Haozuan everything he had seen and heard, Wu Qi even vividly imitated the tone and facial expressions of Liu Bang and Lord Baoang. Wu Qi vividly imitated Liu Bang's fear and trepidation, Lord Baoang's arrogance and reserve, and the caution and seriousness with which they talked about the so-called important matter. The faces of Emperor Haozuan, King Yangshan, Gao, and the few ministers of the imperial family turned extremely unsightly, especially Emperor Haozuan, whose face was so dark that it looked as if a thunderstorm was about to burst out of it at any time. After killing so many powerful clans who had betrayed Diyu and purging so many rebels, Liu Bang still had spies in his hands. What do they want to do? Emperor Haozuan stroked his long beard, shaking his head and smiling bitterly. He felt so exhausted now that he did not even have the strength to be angry. Obviously, the people whom the string of red jade beads in Liu Bang's hand represented were figures of equal status to King Bai Shan and King Wei Shan. Such people were lurking in the dark, ready to deal a fatal blow to Diyu at any time. What else could he do but smile bitterly? Kill all the princes of the imperial family? He, Emperor Haozuan, would be ousted from his throne at the first moment. Conduct another large-scale identification and purge of the powerful clans in Liangzhu? Diyu could not afford a second torment. The great hall was quiet. No one spoke, and everyone bowed their heads in contemplation. After a quarter of an hour, King Yangshan said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, we can only cope with the changes by remaining unchanged. We must keep a close watch on all movements in and around Liangzhu, Yuxiong Plain, and Diyu, and we must respond as soon as possible if anyone makes any unusual movements." Emperor Haozuan nodded slowly. It was impossible to carry out another large-scale purge, so he could only use King Yangshan's method. Fortunately, it could be seen from the purge that most of the higher-ups in Diyu were still loyal. Now that 15% of the powerful clans had been purged, so what if there were still 15% who had ulterior motives? With Diyu's overall strength, could he not deal with these villains? Calming himself down, Emperor Haozuan straightened his back and shouted at Gao, King Wei Shan. Gao took a step forward, bowed slightly, and answered respectfully, "Your Majesty." Emperor Haozuan pondered for a moment, then gave Gao an imperial edict, ordering him to serve as the military minister of Yuxiong army as King Wei Shan. He was to lead the purged army out of Yuxiong Plain and set up camp in Zhang Province, Gao's former fief. Zhang Province was located to the west of Yuxiong Plain, and it would take them half a month to travel from Zhang Province to Yuxiong Plain at the speed of the standard large flying ships distributed by Diyu. Emperor Haozuan ordered Gao to reorganize the army in Zhang Province, restore its morale and combat strength, and return to Liangzhu at once if anything happened. Since the establishment of Diyu, no one had ever been able to command the whole army alone. The huge army was divided into 5 armies, left, right, front, back, and center, and each of them was under the command of the 5 military ministers. Now, it was unprecedented for Gao to command the whole army alone, which showed how much trust Emperor Haozuan had in King Bai Shan and Gao. An eunuch brought 5 dragon seals and handed them to Gao, while Emperor Haozuan wrote the imperial edict himself and gave it to him. Gao, who had suddenly taken control of what could be said to be the strongest army in Diyu, fell to his knees solemnly and received the dragon seals and imperial edict respectfully. After giving Gao a solemn warning, Emperor Haozuan turned to King Yangshan. He had also given King Yangshan an important task, which was to identify and purge the prefecture overseers and marquises of Diyu, and investigate anyone suspicious. There were some words that Emperor Haozuan did not say, but everyone, including Princess Zhanglu, understood what he meant by a strict investigation. It was better to kill 30,000 innocent people than to let a single suspect go free. After King Yangshan received the imperial edict, Emperor Haozuan issued several more appointments to several other ministers of the imperial clan, including asking the three princes with the title of Hai to select capable and reliable sons of the imperial clan and aristocratic clans to train into a new army. The new army was named the Flying Bear Army by Emperor Haozuan. Emperor Haozuan would personally supervise the training and armament of the army, which would be the main garrison of Liangzhu for some time to come. Unlike Yuxiong army, this new army had a large number of sons of the imperial family, and some of the sons of the imperial family whose bloodline was so thin that they had almost nothing to do with the human emperor's bloodline were placed in it. King Yangshan's other three sons were also transferred to the new army to serve as deputy military ministers. Everyone in the Great Hall knew Emperor Haozuan's intention. The Flying Bear Army would be a reliable force in the emperor's hands. As long as the emperor was given some time, with Deyu's strong foundation and Yuxiong Plain's unique resource advantage, the Flying Bear Army would be larger than Yuxiong Army, and its armament and equipment would be better. After issuing a dozen imperial edicts in a row, Emperor Haozuan turned to Wu Qi with a smile of approval on his face. King of East Sea, you have worked hard, and you have been recognized by the sacred emperor. Good, very good. Wu Qi took a step forward, took Princess Zhang Li's hand, and bowed slightly. This is my duty. Emperor Haozuan sighed. Looking at the ceiling of the Great Hall, he shook his head and said, Duty? It's a pity that too many people in Deyu have forgotten their duty as human beings. As human beings, what can they gain by betraying their mother's race? Is immortality really so important? The atmosphere in the Great Hall suddenly became tense. Everyone bowed their heads and listened carefully to Emperor Haozuan's murmur. After a moment of emotion, Emperor Haozuan said in a deep voice, King of East Sea, the secret palace will build a space-piercing passage between Yuxiong Plain and East Sea Province, guiding the natural energy of Yuxiong Plain to a part of East Sea Province. You will go back to East Sea Province, select honest and reliable sons of good people, and train them into an army. The number of soldiers will be decided by you, and you will pay for all the military expenses and armaments. Do you understand why we are doing this? Gao's Yuxiong army was stationed in Zhang Province in the west, and Wu Qi was stationed in East Sea Province in the east. How could Wu Qi not understand Emperor Haozuan's intention? With the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan in the north and the Yen Emperor Shenong in the south, the Celestial Court would not be so stupid as to launch their plan in the north and the south. Both the east and the west needed a strong military force to deter them. By doing this, Emperor Haozuan had entrusted the safety of his flank in the east to Wu Qi. Emperor Haozuan would certainly have a large number of forces lying in ambush in the east, but the visible force was only Wu Qi's East Sea Province. Wu Qi bowed and said, As long as I'm alive, no one from the Celestial Court or the Buddhist League can pass through my territory. Emperor Haozuan clapped his hands and laughed. Wonderful. If it weren't for the fact that you already have a fiancé, I still have several young daughters who would marry you. After that, he cried out, My lords, Deyu is in a precarious situation. I hope you will work hard to hold up the sky for the human race. Wu Qi and the others answered in unison, then cupped their fists and bowed to Emperor Haozuan. Suddenly, Wu Qi breathed a sigh of relief. At last, he was leaving Liangzhu, a land of troubles. With the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League's plan drawing closer, it was no longer suitable for him to stay in Liangzhu. It was bound to become the focus of all conflicts, and the danger here was too great. It was better for him to leave as soon as possible. Just as he was thinking about what he should do when he returned to the East Sea, he heard Emperor Haozuan sigh and say, I really want to capture that king of Han, Liu Bang, alive and interrogate him. But, the ancestors' admonition to not kill envoys in a war between two dynasties is still ringing in my ears. How can I, do such a thing? I really want to know what the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League are trying to do. No one said a word. This time, even King Yangshan and Gao, who were the most radical, did not say a word. Wu Qi could not help but sigh in his heart. Why do I still cling to this damn tradition when I'm being bullied? Should I secretly kill Lu Bang and interrogate him? Should I? Chapter 833. Half a month after receiving Emperor Haozuan's appointment, Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu returned to the East Sea province with a large number of subordinates. Because of the rapid promotion, Wu Qi's territory now included not only the East Sea province, but also 30 nearby provinces divided from Zhong province and 2 other first-grade provinces. These 30 provinces were the fiefs that Wu Qi would inherit for generations to come. As long as they did not rebel and offered a certain amount of tribute to Liang Zhu from time to time, Wu Qi and his descendants could do whatever they wanted in these 30 provinces. With a large number of administrative officials, Lu Qingfeng began to take over the huge territory newly divided under Wu Qi's name. 30 provinces, thousands of counties, hundreds of thousands of cities, from prefecture overseer to county governor, city lord, and all the administrative officials, all had to be managed by Lu Qingfeng. It would be convenient if Wu Qi had thousands of descendants now. By sprinkling them in these 30 provinces, the basic administrative framework would be established. This was also the most common method used by aristocratic clans like Deyu to govern their territories. The problem was that Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu had no descendants now, and they did not have enough people to govern these provinces and counties for the time being. Therefore, all the troubles could only be handled by Lu Qingfeng. It was a good way to use the previous officials for the time being, as long as Yan Bugui sent enough spies to keep a close eye on them. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu were too lazy to pay attention to these trivial matters. Their focus was on Emperor Haozuan's appointment. 36 revered elders from the secret palace secretly followed Wu Qi to the East Sea province. In a huge cave that had been dug overnight under the East Sea city with magic, the revered elders carefully took out a strange-looking supreme tower. The pyramid-shaped supreme tower was pitch black, but in the middle of the tower, which was several miles tall, there was a huge round hole dug out. The circular hole that penetrated the pyramid shone with dazzling spiritual light, and the violent aura of space energy continued to spread from it, making the many East Sea soldiers in the underground cave extremely nervous. This cave, which was dug 1,000 miles deep underground, had a diameter of 20,000 miles and a height of 800 miles. Standing in this circular cave formation, this supreme tower looked so tiny. Under Wu Qi's command, tens of thousands of soldiers of the East Sea carefully carved complicated patterns on the hard rocks around the supreme tower. 36 revered elders of the secret palace carefully examined these patterns, and then filled them with a kind of alloy solution refined with a secret technique. Glinting with a dim purple light, the alloy solution solidified and turned a deep black. As these revered elders worked, a huge formation tens of thousands of miles in diameter, which looked like a blooming black peony, was gradually completed. Thousands of energy crystals mined from under Yuxiong Plain were sent up into the air by magic, hovering hundreds of miles in the air. These huge energy crystals, which measured several miles in diameter, contained an enormous amount of energy. All of the crystals were carved into flawless spheres, which were densely covered with all kinds of complicated runes. The underground formation and the crystals hovering in the air formed a complete energy network. When the last crystal rose into the air, a faint energy pulse began to ripple in the underground cave, which sounded like a heartbeat and made all the soldiers of the East Sea stagger as if they were drunk, unable to stand up straight. Then, 3,600 huge black stone pillars were erected, their tops ablaze with a green flame. Each of them measured 100 feet in diameter and rose hundreds of miles into the air, illuminating the entire cave with a strong green light. These stone pillars suppressed the energy pulse of the formation and stabilized the void in this part of the cave. Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the circular cave, which measured 20,000 miles in diameter and 800 miles in height. Because of the 3,600 pillars, the void in this part of the cave had become extremely stable. Wu Qi did a rough calculation and concluded that this part of the cave should be able to withstand a full-force blow from an immortal who had just stepped into the realm of primordial. These revered elders of the secret palace do have some tricks up their sleeves. Wu Qi could not help but marvel as he looked at the 36 busy revered elders. After the pillars were erected, these revered elders held a grand blood sacrifice under the supreme tower. A large number of livestock were slaughtered, and their blood spilled over every inch of the ground in the cave. As these revered elders murmured incantations, a blinding light burst out of the hole in the center of the supreme tower. Then, sticky liquid energy transformed into 2 water dragons with terrible force and shot out of the hole, slamming into the stone wall thousands of miles away in a flash. The huge cave began to tremble violently. The pillars had sealed off this part of the void, making the stone wall extremely strong. Wu Qi saw that the void, which was strong enough to withstand a full-force blow from a 9th-tier primordial immortal, was cracked open and nearly shattered by the 2 water dragons transformed from the liquid energy. The water dragons of liquid energy kept pouring out of the hole in the center of the supreme tower. Before long, the cave had turned into an ocean of liquid energy, and the water level began to rise rapidly. In just a quarter of an hour, the cave had become as full of liquefied natural energy as the huge spirit cave beneath Yuxiong Plain. Extremely rich Pangu sacred energy was rushing back and forth in the liquid like numerous huge purple dragons. This was the spatial tunnel that Emperor Haozuan had ordered the revered elders of the secret palace to open for Wu Qi. It connected the cave under East Sea City with the huge spirit cave under Yuxiong Plain, drawing the endless natural energy from the spirit cave here to help Wu Qi train his army. The circular cave with a diameter of 20,000 miles was large enough to accommodate more than 1 billion people to cultivate here, and the endless natural energy from the spirit cave under Yuxiong Plain would never run out. Even if 1 billion people were to cultivate here, they would never have to worry about running out of energy. Coupled with the ability of Wu Qi's Dark-Yin Celestial Tower to speed up time by 2,000 times, as long as he could find enough reliable ice plains, the East Sea province could secretly expand its army by hundreds of millions and become an important military city in the east of Liangzhu. When everything was ready, Wu Qi solemnly thanked the revered elders of the secret palace. Then, the 36 revered elders left in secret, just as they had come, without alerting anyone. No one knew that there was such a spirit cave under Wu Qi's East Sea City. Overjoyed, Wu Qi wrapped his arms around Princess Zhongli's waist, laughed out loud and said, "This is the place where you and I will start our family. With this spirit cave, we can have as many soldiers and apprentices as we want." Hee hee. Princess Zhongli was very excited as well. With her hands on her waist, she said triumphantly, "Let Zi Xian take care of the training of the new soldiers. I'm going to fill this cave with the new soldiers." While the two of them were thinking about how to maximize the use of this spirit cave to enhance their overall strength, a gust of cold wind blew over from behind. Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather were running in their direction. Gold Horn and Silver Horn were fleeing in the front, while Gold Feather and Silver Feather were chasing wildly from behind. While running, Gold Horn cried out, "Boss, an old man named Bo Zhongfu is looking for you. Go quickly. He looks like his whole family has been eaten by someone." Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a glance. Then, Princess Zhonglu pointed at the cave and motioned for her to handle the matter here. Wu Qi nodded, then flashed to the ground and appeared in the great hall of the former East Sea Prefecture Overseer's mansion, which was now the King of East Sea's mansion. After becoming the King of East Sea, the mansion was to be expanded according to the Yu's etiquette system, but Wu Qi had no time to pay attention to it. Therefore, the system was still the same as when he was the Prefecture Overseer of East Sea, and the Great Hall was a little cramped. Bo Zhongfu, the Prefecture Overseer of Zhong Province, stood quietly in the middle of the hall with his 3 sons. He clasped his hands behind his back and stared blankly ahead, his expression changing rapidly. But no matter how he changed, it was as Gold Horn had said, his whole family had been eaten by someone, which made him look very ugly. With a gust of chilly wind, Wu Qi appeared out of thin air in front of Bo Zhongfu and bowed to him with a smile. "Your Excellency, Prefecture Overseer." Bo Zhongfu's 3rd son, Bo Yunting, used to be Wu Qi's immediate superior. Just 2 or 3 years ago, Wu Qi had led an army and fought under his command. Therefore, after greeting Bo Zhongfu, Wu Qi nodded to Bo Yunting in a friendly manner. Bo Zhongfu was startled by Wu Qi's sudden appearance. He took a step back and fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, then suddenly dropped to his knees with his 3 sons. An abnormal flush appeared on his pale face as he cried out in a hoarse voice, "King of East Sea, help me. Save my whole family." Although my family and King Wei Shan's bloodline have been related by marriage for generations, King Wei Shan. As he spoke, Bo Zhongfu suddenly choked and coughed violently, with a large amount of blood spraying out of the corner of his mouth. Bo Yunting and his two brothers hurriedly reached out and pressed their father's back, rubbing it hard to help him breathe. Bo Zhongfu gasped violently, then looked at Wu Qi, who was dumbfounded, and cried out, "If King of East Sea can save my whole family, from now on, we'll obey all your orders, and from now on, we'll be at the mercy of the King of East Sea's bloodline for generations to come. If the King of East Sea doesn't believe me, I, Bo Zhongfu, can swear with my soul that if I ever disobey, my family line will be cut off from now on, and I'll sink into depravity forever." Looking at the excited Bo Zhongfu, Wu Qi put on a straight face with a serious expression. But in his heart, Wu Qi was overjoyed. Bo Zhongfu and King Wei Shan were related by marriage for generations. But, the last few generations of King Wei Shan were all the reincarnations of the almighty experts of the Buddhist League. With this relationship, the Bo family was bound to be wiped out in the great purge of local officials by Diyu. But, if he could take Bo Zhongfu under his wing, he would be the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, who was in charge of 300 provinces. With such a vassal clan, Wu Qi's overall strength would be completely different from before, and he would have the potential to become a truly powerful clan of Diyu. With Emperor Haozuan's trust in Wu Qi now, and the friendship between Wu Qi and King Yangshan, what was the big deal about saving the Bo family? Looking at Bo Zhongfu, who kept coughing up blood, Wu Qi pretended to ponder for a long time, then finally nodded slowly. "Third young master and I are very close. How can I just sit back and watch when the Bo family is in trouble? Rest assured, Prefecture Overseer, I'll take full responsibility for the Bo family. As long as the connection between the Bo family and King Wei Shan is completely severed, I promise you that the Bo family will not be implicated in any way." Bo Zhongfu breathed a sigh of relief after getting Wu Qi's promise. He nodded and said with a smile, "The connection between the Bo family and King Wei Shan has been completely severed. Please rest assured, King of East Sea." Wu Qi helped Bo Zhongfu to his feet. They looked at each other and smiled at the same time.